Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I apologize for the very small, like 2 minute delay. I had to deal with some technical stuff to make sure that my internet bandwidth was only focused on you guys on the live stream because my new PlayStation 5 Pro is busy downloading a lot of games and it will still remain busy probably over the weekend, downloading a lot of patches and stuff like that. So, brief shout out to my new PS5 Pro, my new member of the tech family here, the ecosystem that isn't just defined by Apple. With that, also cheers. Hopefully, hit my microphone in a way that doesn't turn it off because that happens. And lessons in Hilda culture. Welcome back to the stream. I've seen your name when all that stuff kept coming out with Apple's M4 devices. Welcome back. I kind of expect a lot of people who were interested in that initial coverage to return, maybe slightly, maybe not in the same crazy numbers, but it's still a very, very welcome thing. So, later, not today, probably, I will give you impressions of my PS5 Pro next week. My birthday is next Tuesday, so I'll probably be able to stream that evening, and then we'll just have a more relaxed time. Maybe I'll have a few drinks on stream, share my impressions of my PS5 Pro, what games I've played, and stuff like that. Probably gonna have like 5 viewers at most or shit like that. Yeah, it's a very, very pretty thing. I have been somebody who has always liked the design language of the regular PS5. And this is just a great refinement. You can see it side by side. Those look like racing stripes basically next to the PS5. I'd already taken off the stand of my regular PS5, but had already installed the stand of the PS5 Pro. It was very, very hectic. Half my room is still like covered in cardboard. Speaking of cardboard or packaging, the packaging is unfortunately like definitely not up to the Apple experience. So if any of you who are probably coming more from the Apple perspective want to dabble in the PlayStation lifestyle, you will have to expect that the premiumness of Apple's experience is definitely not replicated. I also wonder with like the sides here if there truly was no way to like attach them and deattach them that didn't feel so violent, like that initial detach. Like I never really bothered to do that on my PS5 except for when installing the SSD and once a year cleaning like the fan. So I had hoped that that would have improved on the PS5 Pro, and technically it is because you're only taking off one portion at a time, right? So basically half of what you would do with one. Yeah, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, that's not the Apple experience here. Nice of it is that it has 2 terabytes. So actually, by adding my old 2 terabyte Seagate drive, my FireCuda 530 full 7 gigabit per second transfer speeds. I now have 4 terabytes instead in my PS5 Pro instead of 2.85 on my previous PS5. So I'm very, very happy. My regular PS5 will be going to the family of my nieces and my nephew, so everyone can play there still. It's not going to waste. It's not going to sit in an extra room and accumulating dust or anything like that. You can see it's has a form factor more more similar to the Slims that have been introduced last year. So it looks quite a lot sleeker than the regular PS5. So highly, highly recommended. I've thus far seen some very good results with whatever little games have been able to install. But I also understand that given a special regional pricing like 800 euros here in Germany, not everyone can afford it or is willing to pay that much for like a gaming specific thing. But what I know a lot of you are willing to spend a lot of money is the new M4 family of Macs. Take that, LTT. Now, who does the best segues? So, cheers. So, today, in a very uncharacteristic move, I might add, Apple has allowed the embargo for the M4 iMac, the M4 and M4 Pro Mac Mini, and the M4, M4 Pro, and M4 Max MacBook Pro to like basically like be unleashed at the same day, at the same time. That is just so weird to me. I really didn't get that. Like, my expectation this week was kind of that from Tuesday to Thursday, we would have like daily announcements of like, oh, today is iMac review day. Oh, today is Mac Mini review day. Oh, today is MacBook Pro review day. And then, of course, leading to all of those devices being available on November 8th. But this way, we got all of them on November 7th. Take it as you will. So, this is why this was a little hectic. I actually had some other plans, but I prefer to do that. So, Lessons in Hildegard are saying, I'm actually switching to Google soon, Pixel to be exact. Well, we would have an argument here, not because obviously I can tell you what to do or not, but quite honestly, the Pixel is so disappointing with its completely underpowered tensor chips. Like, maybe next year, like when they will have like a 3 nanometer based processor, but they still have those Samsung 4 nanometer node devices, and their modems are not as good as the rest of the industry. Their raw performance is not as good. Their thermals have gotten a little better, but are still inferior. Like, especially like if you imagine like downclocking like a Snapdragon 8 Elite, or even a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and or a Dimensity 9400, Dimensity 9300, and then you scale that down to the performance of the what is it now, the Tensor G4, right? So you're basically getting rid of like 30-40% of your performance. Imagine how much power you're saving on those chips. Lessons in Hilda culture, I'll just call you Hilda. I won't notice the performance. I watch YouTube and send messages. Well, you'll still feel some battery life differences in comparison to other flagships. I guess Google has some nice things like the very bright, like up to 2600 nits display that actually gets that bright, unlike Samsung's 2000 nits rating, which is an HDR rating. And of course, you do have the cameras and stuff like that, but yeah, I understand you're asking like, oh, will my messages be 40% faster? But don't forget, what was sorry, we don't need my Crunchyroll here. So quit. So let me go to an old video, MKBHD, Google Pixel. Okay. What was it? Slowdown drama? I know it has been improved over time, but gimmick are good. Was it MKBHD who made that video? 7 years of hard problems, soft answers. Was it around that? So Google Pixels, because they don't have as much headroom. Now, granted, the Pixel 9 Pro does have some nice things like 16 gigs of memory. The issue is, though, that because those resources are still then pushed onto a relatively slow chip, once you have a system that potentially runs a lot of background tasks, God forbid you have like several messengers, like for example, I use all major messengers basically. I use iMessage, I use Signal, I use Telegram, I use WhatsApp, right? And all that stuff could come to basically hurt your user experience. I'm going with 9 Pro. Performance is the same as my 13 Mini. Not in single core performance. Graphics probably, yeah, because it also has better sustained performance at this point. But then again, if you are coming from a device like the 13 mini, it's always like my question, wouldn't you want something? Again, I'm not dictating you, and I don't want to turn this into a debate because we do have other things to react to. I like to react to my very engaged viewers. I thank you very, very much for tuning in. This is over time, I want to expand this operation. Like, I want to have Discord where you guys can even call in. We can have little debates. You can let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Have to make sure there's some content moderation behind it, but since we are still a relatively small community of live viewers, shouldn't be too much of an issue. So yeah, this is why I engage with you guys. It's because it's fun for me. AV Mail, sorry I'm late. MKBHD keeps calling the Mac Mini the best value computer on the market. Is it really? Well, you can let's start with some very basic things. Like, you can see, for example, that The Verge gave it a 9 out of 10. Everybody loves the small design and stuff like that. The MacBook Pro, similarly highly reviewed. Right, I actually pre-downloaded it, a few videos here that we could react to. I have 3. I'm open to other suggestions, and I actually would like to start with MKBHD. Now, there's probably nothing iMac that I need to react to because the iMac is pretty self-explanatory. It's the least changed, right? It doesn't have the Pro, it doesn't have the Max chip, doesn't have a newer screen or anything else like that, doesn't have Thunderbolt 5 support, doesn't even have an extra port for all we care. It just has slightly faster ports when you go for the full 4-port version. So let's look at what MKBHD had to say. I was able to briefly look into his review. I also liked his thumbnail a lot. This is where a simple thumbnail actually goes a really long way. It's a fun, creative one. So kudos here to Marquez. When I'm going to be turning it on, as always, let me know what the audio and video quality is for you, because AV Mail, I actually do agree. And I actually do agree with his main point that we are primarily talking about the base configuration. And once we are talking about the higher end configs, it does have unique advantages versus basically anything else in the industry, even though it obviously doesn't maintain that like raw performance per dollar advantage that maybe DM4 has at $600. iMac, the #1 choice for public libraries. Yeah, I actually agree. It's because of the integrated nature, which I value, by the way. I know I've been shitting on the iMac a lot ever since the Apple Silicon redesign, but that is because we have gone from iMac 5K, like very ambitious, to iMac Pro, very ambitious, to a 24-inch iMac that didn't even get like the M1 Pro chip, or any other Pro or Max chip, that kept the same pixel density, the same brightness levels, no other display technology, no promotion. When Apple created, by the way, the 5K iMac, they created like a hyper custom display controller so that they can actually run 5K, right? Now, with all that power, especially if they made like an M4 Pro version of it or something like that, they could easily route enough bandwidth to it to make it a 5K 120 hertz screen. Wouldn't have to be any crazy, like it would have to be an LTPO LCD panel, I guess, but it's not too crazy. Apple has been working on those since the 2017 iPad. And they refuse to do so. That's why I shit on it. I understand it's a versatile product. I understand that it's a convenient product. So stuff like public libraries or any other store, right? Or schools. I understand why they are very, very much like attracted to such a device. Hilda, I'm going for Pixel because it's better in every point except performance. I don't play GTA 6 on my phone. Well, neither would you be able to regardless of your phone. Let's watch the videos. Okay, let's start. Some nice ASMR to the start. While Marquez slowly unboxes his Mac Mini, As always, a small plea from me to, if you're watching this, you haven't yet subscribed, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. As you can see, I love interacting with the live chat. Also, please comment once the video is finished, because that helps a lot with the algorithm. More people have been doing it recently, still not enough. But yeah, any view helps, and any comment helps, and any like helps. And of course, if you want to support this channel directly, you can do so via super chats or super stickers. Leave a small donation right here in the live chat, or you can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Max, Maximus, Angelica, and Steve, who are all MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. Or alternatively, you can also go to Patreon and help us over there. When I say us, I mean me, but also broadly our community. Look how small it is. Yeah, it's so cute. And Marquez has large hands, so we know that from how he plays frisbee, right? Like he does have large hands, especially long fingers. Very practical stuff. But I'm so stupid. Yeah, but and it's a very good way to make the Mac Mini look even smaller than it is. It's not Apple TV size like some people were saying. No, it's not Apple TV size. It's quite a bit larger and taller than the Apple TV. But it's closer actually to the Apple TV than to the old Mac Mini. I guess that's why the comparison is being made. Like, it would be closer if it actually had shrunk down the dimensions by exactly half, right? It was previously 7 inches by 7 inches. Now it's 5 by 5 inches. That makes a big difference and stuff like that, but it's not quite like 1/4 the volume or something as people expected. Is that power cable? No, it's not braided. Would have been really, really cool. I actually don't know. Like, anybody who has cats, like my cat lives with my mom, as I've said in the past. She loved chewing like HDMI cables, power cables. I always wondered if like braided cables for that stuff are better or worse. Let me know if like your cat eats your cables too, I guess. Where's your Mac Mini M4? Asking from Paolo. Well, Paolo, did you send me one? Did I receive one in my mailbox today? No, I received my PS5 Pro. That being said, yeah, I obviously did not buy the M4 devices. I'm still incredibly happy with my M1 Max MacBook Pro. I do not want to go through the hurdles of like buying it and then over 2 weeks sending it back. I do have a very busy work schedule. I do have my weekend trips where I visit family and friends and stuff like that, or I have visitors. It would be so easy for me to just lose it, like to just lose track of it and then end up stuck with a desktop Mac that I really don't need. But yeah, this is why this is a live stream channel. Believe me, if I were able to get my hands on all of Apple hardware the way I would love to, then I would be making a lot of scripted content. But since I have to do a lot of reaction stuff because that's missing, I made the best out of it. I made a community where we talk to each other, discuss the things, agree with each other, disagree with, right? That's the vibe here. Robin saying it is braided. Well, that would be cool as F. I think it's just the detail missing. Maybe if I watch it in like 4K or something. But I cannot download 4K, and I usually prefer to download my videos in advance so there's no like internet hiccups or something like that. Josephat, have we confirmed if there's real difference between the single core performance between the M4 Pro and M4 Max? There is none. There is difference between the M4 and M4 Pro and M4 Max, going from 4.4 to 4.5 gigahertz, and there is arguably like 70 extra points in Geekbench over like 3950 to 4020, right? That's probably related to just the the sheer bandwidth of the M4 Max, and maybe just the fact that it's probably just very good silicon in general. Like if it can sustain like 100 billion transistors on one die, it's probably a very good die. Yeah, but there is no like 150 points or something like that. Nothing even resembling 3% or more. And everything below is just margin of error. Um, he is in crippling debt. Who? Uh, I doubt MKBHD is, and neither am I. I recently looked at all my accounts. They're doing quite well. Not great, but because I do have some expensive taste. But yeah, I'm doing quite all right. I would love your help, but hell, I'll tell you, I am in crippling debt, Hilda Culture. Why ain't you paying me? Or maybe you mean MKBHD because of his large operations. I think I should increase volume, right?
Crazy thing about a new piece of tech is enough to get my attention. Just something out of the ordinary about it. But
let me know. Is it loud enough? Is it clear enough?
3 things about it.
Is my volume not completely overshadowing Marquez here?
Instead of having an event this year, Apple decided to do a bunch of press releases in a row for the last week of October to update their whole Mac lineup to M4. And one of them was for this new Mac Mini. Now, a lot of us might not give too much thought to the Mac Mini. Like, yeah, maybe it holds an important place as the most affordable Mac, but if you're not buying one, you're not really thinking about it too much. But the number one most...
Hilda, I do believe that Marquez can afford this. Plus, he gets sent a lot of the hardware. Now, he does have to give it back, but yeah, it would be funny to know that he is in crippling debt because of how big he made everything, right? He has like this giant production studio in that warehouse and stuff like that. But from everything I've seen, he lives... Not humbly in like a Mother Teresa kind way, but he does have a regular big house. Nothing too crazy for a guy with like 18 million subs or something like that at this point. Yeah, but who knows? Hopefully he isn't. Hopefully he's doing quite well. Then he doesn't have to take any stupid sponsors.
Same thing about this refresh.
By the way, some people ask, comparison to Apple TV. It's significantly larger than the Apple TV, especially in volume. Because don't forget, not only is it wider and taller, it also has significantly more height. Wider and longer, I guess, and taller. I always mix those things up in English. There's a little contradictory stuff there that I don't like. But yeah, it is a lot bigger than the Apple TV, especially volumetrically. Yeah, I know it was sarcasm, Hilda Culture. I just like to play dumb a little bit. That's part of my charm, I guess. Yeah, so, and again, you might want to like say, for example, you will like compare it to like the footprint of the Pro Max iPhone, which is a weird comparison point, but obviously the iPhone is consistent. Like, here are the cameras, the screen, right? There are modems inside. There's battery inside. So when we are looking at a device that is purely focused on housing a chip and, well, with that, like some motherboard stuff and shit like that, this isn't that outrageously small for an M4 Mac Mini. What does surprise me is that the M4 Pro Mac Mini is the same as the M4 Mac Mini, if that makes sense. I mean, it's obvious to us now because we've gotten used to it after the initial news, but I kind of almost expected for there to be now 2 Mac Mini in sizes, which if you're somebody who has like those giant server farms that consist of Mac Minis, I guess if the thermals are really good, you're now in heaven, because not only are you getting a big performance boost, but maybe you need to 3D print more racks or like slightly different racks, but you're basically capable of housing twice as many Mac Minis, at least 1.5 as many. There will probably be some issues with power and stuff. Yeah, so that's fascinating that Apple said, we are going to put in our most powerful Pro chip, probably one that consumes even a little bit more power at peak than the M2 Pro did, because it has just so many CPU cores, right? Up to 10 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. Um, but yeah, and we are gonna still keep it in that super small form factor. I almost expected like the old design to survive, and then that small one to be for the M4, but then the larger one being for the M4 Pro. But then the rumor started saying it's just one small Mac Mini with like different ports and stuff like that, and I became a believer, I guess.
Well, I mean, look at it. It's tiny.
It's
It
tiny.
is absolutely tiny. Apple's gone through and redesigned basically all of their computers now that have gotten the Apple Silicon update.
The Mac Pro is the only one that's actually missing that, because this design was actually introduced in 2019. So that's interesting. Or was it 20? Yeah, I believe it's 2019 or 2020. Regardless, it predates obviously Apple Silicon. What I find impressive is that Apple was able to fit all the tech into a it's inches, by the way. Lessons in culture. It's not 5 centimeters, but yes.
Well, except this one. This is the same
An
design
inch
as
is 2.54 centimeters.
a while ago, but the Mac Mini was kind of technically overdue for a redesign, and the
Oh,
new
he
one.
has my mouse, the MX Master 3. Here, there's mine. It's great. It's really great. I do technically like prefer stuff like my Magic keyboard, my Magic trackpad, and of course the trackpad that I have on my MacBook, but it's just not comfortable to use it on top. Maybe over time I'll probably rebuy like the Magic trackpad. I gave away my old one. Somebody else needed it with Lightning, so I'll probably buy the black Magic trackpad. Would be cool, but it's 170 euros, so maybe not. Like my Logitech mouse is serving me pretty well.
It actually kind of looks a little bit more like a shrunken Mac Studio than a
True.
shrunken old
Well,
Mac.
that's because of the front I/O, right? That's what Apple didn't do in the past for the Mac Mini. They did it on the Mac Studio, which is where the Mac Studio can go absolutely apeshit if they also get rid of like USB-A. Just keep focusing on USB-C and stuff. Now Thunderbolt 5, they can probably make those front ports even on the Max chip at that point, like Thunderbolt 4 at the very least. But yeah, it's going to be interesting what Apple pulls out of the hat for the Mac Studio. Team Magic Mouse coming here from AV Mail. I like the Magic Mouse. I never cared. I just like it because no one else does. Well, I like it. Now, do you not like it anymore because I like it? I just prefer the Magic Trackpad. And I mean, you should ask yourself, like, I guess like the Magic Trackpad is larger, so that explains it being more expensive to a degree, but it doesn't have like the move sensor stuff from the mouse, so their price difference never needed to be as high. But I think Apple knows that people just prefer the trackpad and they price it higher that way because of that. So yeah, to me, absolutely, Magic Mouse good, Magic Trackpad fantastic. I would argue it's 2 tiers above the Magic Mouse. It's from good to great to fantastic / phenomenal. And then for different use cases, of course, I would use a traditional mouse. Maybe going for Magic Trackpads. I love the trackpad gestures, as do I, and I do love that the Magic Trackpad is just so like specifically designed for it, right? It's angled slightly. It has a tiny bit of real click before it goes into like 3D touch and stuff like that, or force touch. So yeah, which by the way, the name force touch, whoever inside Apple was probably like doing like the Quagmire from Family Guy giggity when they called something force touch and then released it upon the world. I was always like, you have 3D touch as a name. Like, come on. Like, even if there are slight differences between how it's implemented on a screen versus a trackpad, just call it the freaking same thing. Yeah.
Mac Mini, but it's now a 5-inch by 5-inch footprint and 2 inches tall. I'll say that again.
I thought it was 2.5 inches tall, so 2 inches tall? Man, that's really
now,
tiny.
I like small desktops. And yes, you could get a tiny desktop computer before. There's plenty of amazing mini ITX build videos all over the internet that I've watched for years. They're sick. There's levels to this.
I always struggle with that because to me, the problem with Mini ITX is, of course, you're very limited later on in your choice of graphics card. Because you can, of course, basically take out the motherboard out of a finished GPU, and then you can try to put like your own liquid cooling or whatever on it, make it as small as possible, using just like a ton of copper and stuff like that in this tiny amount of space. But now you're adding cost, right, and complexity. It's potentially difficult to repair at that point. Or you go with a lower end GPU and you potentially never have the freedom to ever upgrade to a GPU that is like over 200 watts, right? That to me just isn't the appeal of PC. And I'm not saying everybody should always care only about high end hardware, but even if you put a 200 watt GPU or 180 watt GPU into a regular ITX case rather than a mini ITX case, right? You have the freedom to upgrade or side grade if you ever have a larger GPU. But even beyond that, it's just easier to operate in because it's not like your GPU just has to sit in that device. At some point, you'll probably take it out. You might want some dust cleaning and shit like that. Maybe another component fails. Now everything is in the way of each other. And yeah, so while I do agree it's cool, and I do watch some stuff like that too, because contrary to public belief, I actually do care about PCs. I do care about Android. I know a lot about tech from not just Apple competitors, but in tech in general. Right, so I guess Mini ITX is kind of like a personal pride exercise rather than just like a convenient thing that one would ever do with tech if you weren't really hardcore into tech.
There's small computers, and then there's tiny computers.
Tiny.
This Mac Mini is smaller than my R5 with a lens on it.
Yeah.
It's smaller than a new roll of duct.
Well, I mean, no, it's volumetrically larger because it does obviously take up space, but I know what you mean, like from one end to the other.
Tape. It's smaller than the footprint of the new iPhone. And
isn't really? That would kind of surprise me. Maybe just it, but the corners are so curved. Hard to imagine. The iPhone would have to be almost twice as tall for that. But they are similar in footprint, regardless.
barely bigger than the absolutely tiny Apple TV.
That's not barely bigger. Like, come on. Like, that's a lot bigger, as it should be. I mean, the best Apple TV has like a bin down A15 chip. There's a big difference here.
Apple seemingly had this obsession with making certain computers as small as possible.
And by the way, that A15 Apple TV is actually, in terms of height, smaller than the previous generation, which had a cooler.
Even before.
Did they get rid of the cooler with the A12 version, or did they do so with the A10X version? I know the A10X definitely still had it. I mean, it is more of an iPad chip than an iPhone chip, so it wasn't quite as suited to passive cooling in such a small product. But I definitely know that like my A15 Apple TV doesn't have it.
Or Apple Silicon came along, so this has just kind of unlocked another level for them to push it even further than ever before. Yeah, there are fans in here. But there are also ports on the back, gigabit Ethernet by default, full-size HDMI is still here, and then 3 Thunderbolt ports on the back. And then there's 2 USB-C 3 ports.
Yeah, the power supply is inside. And that's why it has like that 2-prong power cable. It doesn't have like that special like magnetic power adapter, which connects obviously to like an external power brick on the iMac. Yeah. This is why I'm really concerned with some of the choices that Apple has made with that iMac and has stuck with them for years, because part of a fully integrated product for me is that the power supply should be integrated.
On the front, plus a headphone jack. So still no SD card reader, and there's obviously now no more USB-A. If you tried to build...
I imagine the power supply is quite shrunk down from the previous one. Maybe it uses also like more efficient gallium nitride materials and stuff like that. So I imagine like it's just tuned for like M4 Pro Max power. maybe plus an accessory or something like that. That's one thing that could be concerning. Like if you have a ton of accessories and you run the device at full power and something like that, maybe that could become a bottleneck, but I cannot tell you. Obviously, it would have to be a very pro accessory to challenge that kind of power supply. How many teraflops FP32 is the M4 Max 40 core? Well, you're asking very nice questions that Apple didn't answer. It stands to reason it's probably around the 20 teraflop range because what was it? Like, I believe the M1 Max was 10.3, right? Was pretty much identical to the top rating of the PS5, if I remember correctly. But then the Apple now promises like 90% more of performance, but they do not actually clarify if they mean teraflops, do they mean gigapixels, gigatexels, right? Do they just mean a performance in a specific benchmark? They do provide several benchmarks, and some of them do scale like basically 2x or at least 1.8x versus the original, but that's probably where we would be. M4 Max was around 14.6 teraflops. Was that an official rating though? That's my question. Like also again, if you are considering like we don't know the exact clock speeds, I've seen some games gain 40% over the M3 Max. Here. Now this one M4 here, MacBook Pro. There it is. Look, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where it is, the M3 Max. Oh no, it's only 20. Why did I assume it was 40% faster? Yeah, the problem with this test with Shadow of the Tomb Raider is that this is an emulated game, so it does have potentially CPU bottlenecks. I assume this is probably CPU bottleneck at 140 FPS. So, man, are there no gaming benchmarks? If it's at 20 teraflops FP32, that's half the performance of a 4070 Ti. Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be too crazy, though. Like, oh my God. M1 Max teraflops. Maybe I mistake the M1 Max for... Yeah, the M1 Max had 10.4 teraflops. The M2 Max... that's the M2. Did Apple really not tell us how much teraflops the why does everything have to be German when I open it? So the M2 Max had 13.6 teraflops. Did the M3 Max really only have one extra teraflop? That would be insane. It wouldn't line up with actual benchmarks whatsoever. M3 Max teraflops. Some say it's 21. No, that cannot be. That would be way too high. 14.2 teraflops. Yeah, the problem is that Apple stopped giving us that rating. And then M4 Max, I guess, is just like... let me give you one thing that is probably easier to digest. M4 Max newsroom. Oh, God. Why? Everything on my device change to English. Yes, always change to English. Why does it only do that in Google? Apple introduces M4 Pro and M4 Max. Here, you can see that they don't give you teraflop rating, but what they do give you is 1.9 times faster CPU of M1 Pro. The GPU features up to 20 cores. That's M4 Pro, M4 Max. The GPU is up to 40 performance cores and is up to 1.9x faster than M1 Max. So yeah, I guess. I cannot use a link that you sent. If you mean you sent a link in the comments, those get deleted. YouTube doesn't like links. Cannot help it. Again, I do not have a Discord yet. I'll probably make one over the weekend because I am celebrating my birthday. So I will have some extra time, some extra half hour in between. Probably just make a lazy new Discord and stuff like that. But yeah, the problem is I don't want to use like art like computation from other guys and stuff like that because some stuff changes. CPU Monkey M3 Max. Okay, there are some issues with CPU Monkey, but let's look. CPU Monkey M3 Max versus M4 Max. Does it automatically generate a comparison for me at that point? M4 versus Apple, M4 Max versus Apple M3 Max. That's the German one. Can I please switch to English because most people watching me are in English. So that's a core comparison. What? That's the bint version. Can I please have the full M3 Max? 14 cores. No. Can I? Let me look at another M3 Max because apparently it's too much to ask to just get the right one. There it is. And then now it has the bint M4 Max. It's making fun of me. How do I find the other one? Do I just look for it? M4 Max? Okay, there it is. Thank you. Edit. Okay. And now I have to switch it again to English. What the M4 Max? I swear this website like do I have to click enter? How do I confirm that? Jesus Christ. Hit versus. What the actual living crap is that kind of design? Who designs a website? The versus isn't even like I clicked on the versus, it didn't bring up. You see? I'm not stupid. Here, look. M4 Max. I'm sorry, not Mr. Max. M4 Max, 16 CPU. Okay, let's. Okay, now I was actually stupid. M3 Max. There it is. 16 CPU core and versus activated. Thank you. Okay, so 16 CPU cores. Now that's the correct version. That's the fully enabled one. A core, B core, Donan EP and Donan E core, Palma. Okay, so that's the correct names at the very least. Neural Engine TOPS rating. Did Apple actually provide an official TOPS rating for the M4? Because that's just the one also from the A18, isn't it? Now there are already some mistakes like max GPU memory here. Right? So CPU Monkey is not here very correct. I know, by the way, I am not. The reason why I'm doing this is because sometimes there are mistakes here. Like compute units, I assume if we know the architecture is the same. So max GPU memory is definitely not 32 gigabytes here, but that's one mistake. Does it for AV1? Okay, it knows that AV1 only has decode, not encode. That's not too bad. L2 cache. I didn't know that the M4 Max has such a big L2 cache increase from 32 to 52 megabytes. Can anyone confirm? Also, why would the memory channels have changed? Given that we have pretty linear scaling between just the speed of this memory and the speed of this memory in the advertised one. So there's some weird stuff. If you scroll down, it's referring to the base M4. If you scroll down, it does say 120. Okay, so this is a website issue. I'm not stupid. So where's the iGPU section? Cinebench, 177, that's correct. Which, by the way, blows out everything else in the water. 3950, most benchmark I've seen of the M4 Max actually deliver over 4,000. It's the M4 Pro that seems to be stuck at around 3940, 3950. Multi-core, yes, that's correct. 26,000, close to 27,000 actually. Geekbench, I don't care. Here, iGPU FP32 performance, 17 teraflops apparently, right? That's 17,000 gigaflops. If that's correct, If that is correct, I spoke just like Mario. Jesus, I'm so freaking stupid. So to your question, if that helps, it's apparently 17 teraflops. Now, that wouldn't line up with the performance promise that Apple made, but then again, there are other bottlenecks that might have been overcome. This is more of like a 62% increase over the original M1 Max. Apple promises a 90% improvement. Maybe their performance has scaled beyond the raw teraflops. I couldn't tell you that. What's interesting here is they do mention 1.68 gigahertz. Is that the clock speeds for the GPU? That would actually be very interesting to find out fully. AI performance, that is not a test, by the way. This is just a metric that Apple provides. Tops. This is always interesting to me because, like you see, by the way, it's still 16 cores. Both of them apparently clocked at the same clock speed, but this one is magically 10% faster. Just putting some of that into question. They do sometimes just copy paste data. And yeah, here it is, the clock speed difference, multi-core, missing Cinebench results. That will probably be added soon. Keep going down. We'll now show the best CPU in the world for single core and multi-core. Yeah, I mean, I know that this does have the fastest. So I guess it's comparing that also here to the 3900K, the HX versions. I mean, makes sense. People probably want to know how it compares to other laptop chips, and it just demolishes the mobile competition. Some say 17, some say 18. I don't know. But this rate, it's fair to say M5 Max will be at least or at worst 20 teraflops. Yeah, I kind of agree. We're kind of overdue a core count increase on the M5 at that point. Maybe with like 5% more density and some better efficiency, Apple could give us 48, like a 20%, 25% increase would be quite nice. Sorry, a 20% increase in core counts. But yeah, that's obviously speculation. I had hoped the DM4 Max would be that chip that goes up to like 48 GPU cores, but alas, it did not. Apple need to focus on compute now. Well, in raw compute, Apple is actually incredibly competitive. I've looked at some Blender benchmarks. It isn't faring too badly. Especially considering like the state of the optics API versus like Blender has gotten good on Apple, but it still like doesn't feel like it's perfectly optimized for Metal, especially for the new promises that Apple makes with like 2 times faster ray tracing engine. So yeah, who knows? We'll see more and more better comparisons, by the way. Like, for example, Cyberpunk 2077 is coming early next year to Max, right? That will be a huge way to compare like highly demanding. I hope they bring out all the ray tracing bells and whistles versus the PC side. And then of course it's also going to be a great way to test how the Max scales versus the Pro in real games, how the Ultra scales versus the Max. So yeah, there's a lot that we'll be able to analyze. If you go to single core speed and hit read more, it literally demolishes top. Yeah, I know. We looked into desktop. We looked into benchmarks once it was already leaked. So yeah, it's not surprising. I am questioning some other stuff here, like the amount of cache that is mentioned, but obviously it's good to have like performance aggregation website. I want it to be on a level where it could brute force just emulating games like Crossover, etc. Yeah, but then the problem is, you like, for example, next year Apple will have a clear efficiency advantage, at least on a silicon basis, versus Nvidia's Blackwell GPUs, right? It will be architecturally a lot better than even RDNA 4, which has yet to come out. We know, for example, that Strix Halo SoCs will actually be based still on 4 nanometer and RDNA 3.5, so it will be absolutely no competition to the M3 Max. It will have 40 compute units, actually pretty similar compute units, but it will all be built on a 256-bit bus. The M3 Max and M4 Max, of course, being built on an 512-bit bus and the same 8533 memory. Intel is kind of effed given what we've seen from like desktop Arrow Lake actually coming in below the performance of the 4900K and the 3900K. Yeah, I just like Apple probably can like really benefit from one crazy year of GPU upgrades, let's say more cores, new architecture, stuff like that. But they probably don't feel they need to, because while in raw performance, sure, an 120 watt RTX 4080 mobile or 4090 mobile especially will still be the M4 Max. And then, of course, a 5070 mobile and 5080 mobile and the 5090 mobile will beat it. But Apple will for one give you the full performance on battery, or basically full performance. On the Max chips, it can fluctuate a little bit down, uh, but you will it will have full power and battery, and you will have way longer battery life while actually doing stuff because the power consumption is so much lower. You will also have usually just a much better experience, because when you have a dedicated GPU, you need a lot of like software workarounds. Like it has to be turned off half the time, and then the iGPU takes over. Otherwise, the battery life just becomes like 20 minutes or something like that. The devices are thick and heavy because they have to house such extreme cooling stuff. Their value proposition usually against Macs, even when it comes to high-end storage and RAM configurations, they're usually not that great, and they're also not as versatile. So you would probably, if you wanted to go, for example, for 8 terabytes of storage, you would probably have to build your own NVMe SSD into it and stuff like that. And obviously, Apple will have up to 128 gigs of RAM available for both CPU and GPU tasks here. Meanwhile, the RTX, I believe 5090 mobile, is rumored to be a 24 gigabyte GPU. So currently the 4090 mobile is actually 16 gigabytes. Maybe they'll finally do it, and then they have like basically their mobile quadro chips or something like that, and those are so completely expensive that it makes Apple look sane, which is absolutely insane. So yeah, isn't it embarrassing that Apple is wiping the floor with AMD and Intel in terms of CPU, both single and multi-core? Yeah, I guess with AMD, at least you can make the excuse like, oh, AMD builds like their chip for scaling, right? They have that chiplet that they use across like desktop. They will even use it in mobile. They will use they use it in servers, right, and stuff like that. So they do a lot of stuff to shave down costs, which Apple doesn't need to do. Plus, they use an older node and stuff like that. Plus, they are significantly smaller. It's Intel where it gets really embarrassing, because Intel has had that historic advantage in CPU performance. I believe it was one guy, I don't know who that guy was anymore, but they said like it feels like Intel was like given alien technology when it comes to the CPU, but then they barely had anything to do beyond that, right? I mean, obviously that's not true. Even from the Intel Core Duo days, they did a lot of research and development, and now that they have to basically start over, they removed hyper-threading, they even lowered peak clock speeds, they went from their own foundries to TSMC. Next year, they're finally getting back to their foundries again after 1.5 years. So I'm like, who even needed that experiment with TSMC? and they will use 18A, but we don't know how high 18A clocks. We've already seen, for example, how Intel 4 clocks higher than TSMC's N3B. And they don't have the IPC gains that they promised. Like, a lot of people expected like 20% IPC gain to make up for like a 5% to 8% like clock speed loss. In the end, they gave you 9% IPC gains and a 5% clock speed loss. And some tasks are very clock speed dependent, so many tasks actually became slower. Then they created a weird P-core and E-core design. Let me show you that. Error Lake P E-core layout, and then we can go back to the video. Is there an image here? Yeah, that's very good. Please, there it is. So you can see, oh Jesus, yes. You can see the way it's laid out, right? You have P cores. They're pretty big cores. One core is almost equivalent to like 4 E cores. And then you have an E core cluster right next to a P core. So you have this like weird layout where the P cores have a hard time communicating with each other. Like, they're literally further apart from each other than they need to be. That helps spread out heat. And that helps obviously with a lot of like components, even like power supply and stuff, where obviously that tech is getting smaller and smaller, getting more and more influenced by potential interference and stuff like that. But now they have like the worst communication between P cores that they've had for years. They actually had a pretty good like ring bus. Granted, they overclocked the snot out of it for the 4900K, which ended up frying a lot of chips. But yeah, there's just weird decisions that Intel makes across the board, from like what nodes they use to like how they change their architectures. I'm just really confused, and I just don't know if Intel will even be able to build like 18A chips. I don't know how much money they have going forward. So let's actually continue with MKBHD and the Mac Mini.
Or buy another computer to match this thing. You will either end up building a computer that's just as small, but nowhere near as capable, or a computer that's just as capable, but nowhere near as small. This is just a hilariously, unnecessarily tiny computer.
But I would actually say, like, in a way, it's not unnecessarily tiny, right? It fits all the ports. Even Thunderbolt 5 ports. It clearly is capable of handling the thermals. Guess it could be even quieter or whatever if you make it like 10% larger. But at that point, like, look, it fits into one of those like mini drawers. That's fantastic. It's phenomenal for cable management because you can put it next to the wall. The exhaust for heat is not on the back. It's the bottom is both the it breathes in cold air and at the front and exhausts it on the back as hot air. So while yeah, sure, it could still be larger, but that's part of the appeal.
It's great. I would also like to start a new conspiracy theory. I would like to use this video to start a conspiracy theory. I think...
Bro, not so fast after the US elections. We already have like so many conspiracy theories popping up. Please, no.
That there is someone whose job it is at Apple, someone whose sole purpose is to come up with one obnoxious thing to complain about for every new Apple product redesign. Like, this is the person that put the notch on the iPhone. This is the person that put the charge port.
Now, the notch on the iPhone, I fully believe, is not something made by one person. This is a company-wide effort. I know, like, people will say, why isn't the USB-C port on the front or the back of this? Please, guys, don't mention Trump. Please, you're gonna watch my ears bleed, and then that blood is gonna drop down my ear pods. Please don't. But yeah, that port down below, again, I fully believe that Apple just doesn't want to show ports on the Magic Mouse because, I mean, look at it. Like, with the slightly elevated keyboard, like, obviously there's plenty of room on the back for ports, but if they want to keep the Magic Mouse basically flat and forgive me for misusing that term, as down to earth as possible, which I know some people have said, oh, it's an ergonomic nightmare because they have no idea how to actually use it. And they use it once and then they complain, oh my God, my hand is strained because I did the weirdest movements on purpose on it. It's not as ergonomic as my elevated mouse that has this special rest for my thumb. Yeah, no shit, it's a multi-touch thing. So yeah, just to me, like, I never got the complaint. I mean, it looks funny when you charge it with that arrangement, but it is what it is. Like, it's not something that would ever change my mind on buying it or not. Even if the USB-C is in the bottom, it's done on purpose. When people review it, it will never show ports. Exactly, it's an aesthetic thing. Plus, how often do people charge it? Never, literally. Like, you charge it once a month for maybe convenience, and I guess you would charge it once every 2 months in need, right? And even then, like, charge it for 15 minutes, go to the bathroom, and then do the rest over the night or something like that. Apple didn't want to show ports because they wanted to look simplistic. That's absolutely correct. Charge it in like 5 minutes. Yeah, absolutely.
Port at the bottom of the Magic Mouse, and this
That's
person's
the advantage if you don't do silly shit like 50 buttons, or you don't do like RGB stuff in your stuff. You'll make some decisions that some people will dislike because, oh, our device is so tiny, let us keep it as tiny as possible. I know some people will complain, oh, they made the Mac Mini so small, they took away my USB-A ports. Brother, it's 2024 and they're giving you Thunderbolt 5. Chill out with your need for USB-A. I know some people are asking for SD cards slots. It's a little bit complicated with SD cards because obviously Apple does have the SD card slot on the MacBook. But my question always is, with so many pros actually switching to cameras that use like faster standards than SD cards, they're almost like mini NVMe drives. And some cameras flat out needing fast external storage. And some cameras doing very well in just housing some storage and then transferring it over USB-C to any device you connect them to. Like, I just always wondered, like, is SD card really what it was 10 years ago? Maybe some of you who might be a little bit more professional in that regard could tell me.
best work is right here on this new Mac Mini.
Yeah, and they remove ports all the time. Yeah. Why can't people be like you? Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is I don't want everyone to be like me. I want people, for example, to hold Apple more accountable, to ask for lower prices and stuff like that. I am partially that too, but maybe not as aggressive as like an LTT would be. Which, by the way, I wonder if they made a review for this, but they probably don't get like day one devices. But yeah, and then headphone jack. I mean, they didn't just not take it away from Macs. They even gave you a better headphone jack, a higher impedance headphone jack that can work with a little bit more professional audio equipment. For real professional equipment, you would probably want like a DAC. But yeah, it's all silliness at this point.
Putting the power button on the bottom of it. Like, why? There are so
Why not?
many better places to put a power button.
Visually, actually not. I've always said the power button on the side back looks terrible, but obviously, and it looks great down below because I don't see it. But I mean, what, you lift it up ever so slightly, which wouldn't even interfere if you even have to like 20 cables hanging off the back. But I guess it's an interesting meme, and I like the conspiracy theory that Apple does put some salt in the wound of like, oh, it's not perfect. There's one button misplaced. to also get memes and reactions and stuff like that. I disagree that the notch on the iPhone would be part of that, and I think that maybe on the Magic Mouse it is part of keeping that USB-C on the bottom. But I also don't think that Apple is really interested in drama. The Mac Mini is just so positively received. I think at that point they probably were saying, you know what, we can put the power button pretty much anywhere.
At the front or the side?
I
Or
mean, that depends. They do have this dual motherboard layout that we've seen from their thermal explanation videos. And granted, I know that obviously it's just one cable. You can route it throughout the entire device to a button, but I'm like, also like, why would you just put it as close to that as you would want? Put it in a place where it interferes the least with other hardware. Even with the power button, it doesn't bother me. I never turn off my Mac since it's power efficient. It on sleep consumes little to no energy. Yeah, it's like what was it, like 0.8 watts or something like that?
literally anywhere on the back, like all the other
And
small
then even
Mac.
when it's doing tasks in the most basic way, it's still like consuming less energy than a lot of Windows PCs will actually consume on standby, because they have like that pretty energy expensive communication, right? You have the CPU on the motherboard, has to communicate with the chipset that is separate, has to communicate with the GPU that sits in a PCIe slot, right? So you get like a lot of like 20 watts or something there idling. The Mac Mini will just undercut that by like 10x or something like that.
Mac desktops or at the top. That would have been fine
Guys,
too.
we've been streaming for a little over an hour. Small reminder to do all the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. You see, I love interacting with the live chat. You can also support this channel directly by sending a small donation in the form of a super chat or super sticker. Guaranteed to read your message, to react to you, and it helps out the channel a little bit. Plus, you can also become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Max, Maximus, and Steve, who are all MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. And you can also become a supporter over on Patreon. Any little support helps and is very much appreciated.
But no, they chose behind the back corner, which is just, I mean, I don't use that button very often. I don't.
By the way, one thing that I expected from renders, I don't know why, I expected it to sit a little bit higher off the ground with those vents. Like, almost expected them to have more space. I wonder if there's just a lot, like how easy it is to cool the M4 Pro, that Apple gives you, like with those 2 millimeters where it can suck in air, right? It just looked taller. Like that bottom black portion, I thought looked taller. And I thought therefore it would make it easy to hit the button, because I expected that empty space, space to actually be there for your finger to fit under. But they did what they did with the Apple TV. Like, they barely give it any room to breathe in air, because probably they're fine with the thermals.
Really turn the Mac on and off with a button almost ever. I might sleep it and wake it back up, and maybe every couple weeks I'll have to remember that the button's back there. But yeah, it's just dumb enough to get memed on and complained about without actually being an issue.
Rosa
Well played,
joining.
guy.
Hi.
But yeah, you know, the
Hi.
typical
Back.
consequences of a computer getting smaller are battery, speakers, and thermals. There's just less room inside for those things.
I guess also like everything, because, well, while you would usually not shrink down microphones, but maybe you would like remove one if you go all too crazy with like less space. Battery, sure. Speakers, yeah. I would also argue that with speakers there's also a quality of life thing that I'm not a huge fan on the 5.1 millimeter M4 iPad Pro, which is that because the speakers in it are actually still quite fantastic, but the device is so thin, if you were to hold it, well, the speakers are anywhere at say like over 40-50% volume, it would rattle in your hands. So thickness isn't just like higher quality or louder speakers, it's also higher quality of actually using it.
Things, Battery, of course, doesn't make a huge difference on a desktop. Who cares? Speakers, kind of the same thing. Who cares?
I believe they do have a speaker though, both in the Mac Mini, and I know they do have it in the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro to like do the chime sound like that when you first boot up Mac OS.
And thermals have been redesigned
And
in a way.
by the way, I'm not saying that they're so vain they put in a speaker just for that. It's also for accessibility stuff. So let's say your speaker, your external speaker doesn't work or something, and you need the sound for whatever reason, then you still have a speaker and stuff like that.
That seemed to be working just fine. This thing hardly gets over a peep. If you do heavy stuff, the single fan spins up and you can hear
That's a studio display, right? That's not the Pro Display XDR.
it, but it's always been quiet.
Or is it? I mean, it looks sufficiently big to be the Pro Display XDR, but the bezels look thicker than I remember on the PDXDR.
Sitting on the desk, you hardly hear it. So then the number two.
So apparently the fan noise is great, which either means it runs super hot, but I guess like there's still no thermal throttling or anything else like it. So seems like a well-engineered product. And I mean, if we actually look here at the benchmarks for the Mac Mini, a few benchmarks here coming from The Verge. Don't worry, guys. We'll keep on like looking into more benchmarks coming out, more impressions coming out. This is just the first salvo of content. So this is the DM4 Mac Mini, and they actually included the iMac. That's nice. So Cinebench Multi. You see. Wait, what? So the iMac seems to really underperform in multi-core tests for some reason. Delivers about the same performance in single core. Cinebench GPU. But now it wins in the GPU test here. I wonder if they ran those benchmarks only once and didn't average anything. Because those are okay run-to-run variants. It's just weird to see them here, like a 10% variance almost. Cinebench 2024 multi 30-minute loop. You see basically equal performance. So the sustained performance seems to be okay. Geekbench single core. We do have, of course, that's a very, very high M4 score, 3900 at 4.4 gigahertz. Okay, guess the M4 is even better than we thought. Geekbench Multi. We saw some from the Russian leakers. We saw that be like 15,500 or something like that. Again, could be run-to-run variants. Could be maybe if you artificially put the fans on maximum cooling or something like that. But yeah, 14,000 over 14,500 seems to be a little overperforming the M4 in the iPad Pro. Geekbench 6 Compute. That's actually a little underwhelming for a 10-core GPU versus the 6-core GPU on the. So I see. Oh, it's OpenCL. Why? Why are you testing OpenCL? Nobody cares. Yeah, that makes sense. Those tests make sense. 58K. And where's the M4 Pro Mac Mini? Do they not have benchmarks for it? Okay, so they just tested the M4. So I guess the MacBook Pro scores are also our M4 Pro scores and stuff like that. So what do we have? We have the MacBook Pro 16-inch with the M4 Pro, the full configuration, and the full configuration of the M4 Max. So when we look at Premiere Pro 4K export, that's the M4 versus the M3. So the M4 is a little faster. The M3 Max, that's a weird way, by the way, to order those. Like going from M4 to M3 to M3 Max to M2 Max to M4 Pro to M4 Max. That's so weird. Cinebench multi-core, yep, M4. But like, okay, so M4 versus M3 Max, that makes sense in terms of scaling. Single core, my god, over 180 here, that's just insane. But I guess the M4 Pro also outperforms the regular M4. Geekbench here again, over 4,000, first device to hit that in the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Geekbench Multi M4 Pro going up to 2260, 22,600. Here, this is 26,400. Then metal, we have almost 200,000 points on the M4 Max, over 110,000 points on the M4 Pro. So the scaling doesn't seem to be 2x between those chips, but we have roughly 2x actually from the base M4 to the M4 Pro. I guess the fact that it has faster memory over a 2 times larger bus also helps. While here we have a 2 times larger bus, but the same speed of memory. The Westerosi Ninja saying detailed noise and thermal testing is what I really want out of these reviews. Yeah, but the early stage of reviews like that is usually very much for the mass market, not for nerds like us. I assume we'll get to some points here. Don't care where the dumb power button is, neither do most people here. So, but hey, welcome to the stream. Puget Bench, by the way, this is the fastest Photoshop Puget Bench device in the world. The 9800X3D that was just tested yesterday gives you around that performance of the M4 Pro. You should know that Photoshop is mostly a single core test, not entirely. It likes a little bit of bandwidth, it likes a few more cores, but it scales really poorly with extra cores. So it's actually interesting that there's still a notable difference between the M4 Pro and the M4 Max. But again, there could be some run-to-run variants here. And the M4 actually, like, there is nothing in that price range, nothing in that power consumption range that will give you over 10,000 points for Puget Bench Photoshop. That is just unparalleled performance, you should understand. Like, the only thing that was close was the M3 here. But everything else that will be like this will also be just bound to a CPU or an SoC that consumes not like 17, 18, or 20 watts, but more like 30, 35, 40 watts. And once we're looking at the true, like, what would it be, like the upcoming Intel Core 285HX, would it be called, or something like that? That is just like in an entirely different class of devices where the CPU itself, to upgrade to that from like a lower, like a 265 HX or something like that, could cost as much as the Mac Mini. So just so you understand, now this is obviously in the MacBook Pro, and you get a system with it with a nice mini LED screen and stuff like that. But if you are somebody who is like, oh, I'm a Photoshop guy and things like that, the value of the base Mac Mini, even if you give it $200 more for 512 gigs of storage, and then you use like an external SSD for the rest, because I do encourage people to get 512 gigabytes. It will last longer. It will also be slightly faster, not double the speed, which we had in the past when Apple was using one module. But yeah, definitely some nice improvements. By the way, also some pretty good storage speeds here. We basically have PCIe 3x4 speeds on the M4 and M3 devices. Seemingly a slight performance boost on the storage used on the M4. And then we basically are maxing out what would be PCIe 4x4 here on the M4 Max with almost 8 gigabytes per second here. So quite nice. Now they do test, unfortunately, only one game, which is terrible because this is an x86 game. There are so many games that are coming out to the Apple Silicon. Why you would ever choose an emulated game? This is most likely, once again, a CPU bottleneck game, and I wouldn't be surprised if like the M3 Max could probably run it at 200 FPS, and then this could run it at like 240 FPS or something like that. But because emulation or translation even. As emulation definitely comes with a CPU bottleneck, translation usually still has one. It's just less pronounced. I would just assume that they're using the extra power here to just give you, what would it be, like 15% more performance. That would line up pretty well with the increases in even like single core CPU performance. So nothing crazy here. The media encoders are not dramatically improved either, at least in this 4K export. Unfortunately, they do not clarify which encoder it uses. Because yes, by the way, look at that speed where it's like 1 minute. This is why like H.264 and even to a degree H.265, those encoders will not get crazy improvements. What will get crazy improvements, I assume, is that the M5 generation. Where did we have the CPU monkey, right? Will get AV1 encode, and then it can be used for actually editing it rather than just playback. And I assume that that is going to be where a lot of Apple's development and research goes forward, where that you can also edit AV1, which is even higher density or higher compression than H.264. And for everything else, I believe they're missing it. Oh my god, this is such a silly website. Like, there's ProRes encoders and decoders in here. In fact, there are two in the Pro Max. So, in the Max, MacBook Pro. So, yeah, just saying, if you are somebody who really wants faster H.264, a lot of the extra gains will just come from a generally faster system, like better CPU, better GPU. But if you're primarily limited by the encoders, because you might have small files, let's say 1080p, 1440p, or even one 4K file, right? If you're not editing like 20 files multicam together or something like that, you are perfectly fine with even M1 devices at this point. Will Intel still be the king of transcoding after the M4 release? Are they still the king of transcoding? Because my question is like, is Handbrake even a good app on macOS? I know, I know Intel wins in Handbrake, but what is that app that Apple uses? Like, isn't there like a specific tool that you have? Even then, even if Intel still wins, I probably wouldn't care. Plus, also, there is extra stuff. Like, if you are working with higher intensity, like ProRes files, well, there's absolutely no competition to how Apple handles ProRes to how the rest of the industry handles ProRes. And by the way, ProRes, while it is Apple tech, it's not proprietary in the sense that nobody else has access to. Like, you can record ProRes on a ton of cameras, and of course the iPhone. QuickSync is still pretty darn good for multi-core transcoding. Yeah, it is. That's been a good thing on Intel for a long period of time. It was always funny to see their integrated GPUs get progressively worse versus the competition, because they just, at some point, they hit actually a nice performance level on the iGPU, but then they were like, you know what, that's okay, right? And then it took basically Apple's like SoCs to challenge them. But over that time, even while their GPU sucked, their QuickSync encoders and decoders were doing a pretty good job. So that, the way they just distributed transistors just always was weird to me.
Same thing about the new Mac Mini is that the base model is kind of an incredible deal now.
Why that money flex?
I don't think you understand. I think it's actually one of the best deals in tech. It's certainly the best out of any of Apple's new product offerings right now. And I mean, I kind of not used to saying it, but it is a really good deal. So this base M4 Mac Mini costs $599, right? So for that, you get the base computer with the M4 chip, which is quietly doubled to 16 gigs of unified memory instead of 8 from before. It's the 10-core CPU and the 10-core GPU. Now,
yeah, part of the great value is that you get the full M4 unleashed, right? Don't have to pay any extra for. Granted, I would argue if this was an 8 plus 8 core M4 or like a 9 core CPU with one P core disabled, I would argue if by upgrading to 512 gigabytes, you also got the fully enabled M4 for free, that would still make the base version pretty good value. But considering that you don't have to do that, that if you are, for example, using your Mac Mini with like an external NAS with like 16 terabytes or something crazy, you could probably even live with 256 gigs right on device. The Westerosi Ninja, great answer for Intel versus Apple, by the way. Well, thank you, man.
4 generations into Apple Silicon, and the gains are actually kind of starting to stack up versus M1. We already know it was
The
a huge
M4
difference
Max
from the
generation is the first one to make me consider upgrading my M1 Max MacBook Pro, but it's that MacBook Pro that holds me back from upgrading. Because for everything else that I do on it, including stuff like streaming, nothing has happened to make most of my use cases actually better under M4, even though I would appreciate even faster app load times, even more stable web surfing or stuff like that. But at that point, I am thinking of downgrading in a way by going from an M1 Max to a potentially later on a Pro chip. And in that regard, I would probably want to wait until there are 2 nanometer or 16 angstrom chips that are just hyper efficient and can have more cores on like a similar die size to the M1 Pro or something like that, but that makes them way faster than even my M1 Max in GPU, while consuming way less power, giving me longer battery life. Plus, I would like tandem OLED as an update. So yeah, a lot of good stuff that will be coming up. The Westerosi Ninja, the only thing I thought about against upgrading storage is if the SSD fails out of warranty, you're basically left with a brick. Cursed me to choose the base M4 Mini. Yeah, I've heard that stuff. Like, I heard that even on the PlayStation, where people are like, oh my God, if the SSD fails, like the system is a brick. How often does the SSD actually fail for most people? I just wouldn't base my decisions on that kind of outcome. I understand there's obviously different value thought of like, oh, do I pay $600 for a potential break down the line? Do I pay $1,000, let's say if you want the 1 terabyte version, for a brick down the line? I understand that, but it just robs you so much of enjoyment to always think of like, oh, what is gonna happen badly next?
the Intel chips, but I actually want to get a little bit more into that in the MacBook Pro review, because I've been using an M1 Max MacBook Pro for 3 years since it came out.
Same.
And the M4 Max is the first one that's actually tempted me to upgrade between generations of Apple Silicon. It's really interesting. So get subscribed and stay tuned for that video when it comes out. But the main thing you need to know is this base M4 chip is great. It's super solid and power efficient at everyday normal activities like web browsing and music streaming and multitasking like crazy. And it can handle what I think I would call medium grade activities very easily. Not heavy stuff like graphically intensive gaming or a heavy video editing, but pretty much anything short of that. This could be a coding and developing machine. This could be a photo editing machine. Pixelmator runs like a dream.
If you're gonna upgrade, maybe just spend the extra $100 on Apple Care Plus.
But yeah, just having a ton of ARC tabs open, stuff like that.
The problem with Apple Care is it costs more the more expensive your device is. To me, I wouldn't buy the Mac Mini. I do like my devices portable, granted, which the Mac Mini is now in a way, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I understand that, but on the MacBook, it would be like $300 for me or something like that. I didn't buy it, by the way, on my MacBook Pro, and it would have already run out. So, and that's money that kind of would have gone down the drain. But of course, if something had happened, it wouldn't have. So it's this woulda, shoulda, coulda. Again, for a human, for example, I always say be careful, right? Get health insurance, get even an insurance for like big property damage or something like that, because anything can happen that isn't your fault or something like that. But when it comes to tech, especially if you're somebody who would think, oh, I might upgrade in the not too distant future anyway, right? Which at the point of buying the MacBook Pro, I fully expected to be like tempted by at least by 2025. Now I'm not even sure if by 2026 I will feel the need to upgrade my Mac. I do have my iPad, which I will probably upgrade at some point. And I did buy them in the same year. So I'm just trying to say there's a lot here to consider, because obviously every penny counts. For example, if you do have education discount, you can get this base Mac Mini for $500. Now $100 extra for Apple Care Plus is 20% of that cost. At that point, you would be like, oh my God, if in 2 or 3 years, maybe Apple doubles the base storage as well, I can get such a good Mac Mini at that point. Maybe the base price will not be $600 anymore, but $700. My assumption is that Apple will soon double base storage on 256 gigabyte devices, but while doing so, they will increase the base price by $100, and I will still think it's a good value for most people. Like, let's say the MacBook Air then starts at $1199, right? But at that point, it over the last few years, it went from 8 gigs of RAM to 16 gigs of RAM. It might get a third USB-C port, which will get it versatility. It of course got the M2 redesign. Plus, it got rid of the terrible like one module 256 gigabyte storage, and now you would also get 512 gigabytes in general. That to me is very much a worthwhile reason to have a price increase. Obviously, Apple could absolutely go bananas and give us the same base price with 512 gigabytes, but I think that would kill some of the upgrade ladder. Like, I think everything will kill some of the upgrade ladder, but I think the 512 gigabyte version will just look too good. It will not entice people to pay any cent more for 1 terabyte. Well, if you keep the base price a little higher, now $200 doesn't sound too bad. And Apple could still get you to upgrades, could still get their margins high. Yeah, but there's a lot to consider between like binned or unbinned chips, regular chip, Pro and Max chips. Do I need more storage? Do I need more RAM? Do I need Thunderbolt 5? Like, that's also cost, by the way. Like, of course, Thunderbolt 5 is included, quote unquote, with like the M4 Pro and M4 Max. But would you really buy accessories that leverage Thunderbolt 5? Because those are likely to be more expensive. So the costs just keep on stacking up if you want something that is super duper nice. And the problem is that most people are probably would be happy even with the completely base M4 Mac Mini, because so many people I know, they stream movies from the web, right? They keep a lot of their files in something like Outlook. Like, they might have 1 terabyte OneDrive from their work or from their school and something like that. And yeah, they might never notice, oh, I only have 256 gigabytes on my device. They might keep their photos in iCloud and stuff like that. And sure, while that's also cost, that's cost you're already paying because you want that access on your iPhone or your iPad. Previous devices that might have only had 128 gigs of storage or something like that. So yeah, there's just so much. This is why I never give like super basic recommendations of like that device is the right for you. I always try to make it a little more nuanced.
Multitasking, it runs like a dream. It's great. It's as good as you'd expect the world's fastest single core performer to do. So yeah, Mac Mini, 4 years, like I said.
But you will also get a tiny bit of extra stuff from the M4 Pro and, of course, the M4 Max. We just saw that it has 2 times faster storage. Even if you don't leverage the entire bandwidth, right, of the large memory bus, you would still benefit from slightly faster memory, even for opening like one app, like 8533 versus 7500 megatransfers RAM. That is how we get from like 3,800 points in Geekbench all the way up to slightly over 4,000. Not a big leap, but definitely something that you could brag about.
It has been the most affordable Mac, the sort of entry point for anyone to get into Mac OS. But this year, with the doubling of the base memory, it just feels like a particularly good deal. Think of it this way. The M4 iMac that also just got refreshed is basically the exact same computer, but just in an upright desktop with a non-replaceable display. That starts at $1,299. So you can use that $700 difference to kind of get whatever screen you want.
And not only that, but that $1,299 iMac, and I will use that opportunity to shit on the iMac once again. Apple iMac. Still German, change to English, please. Okay, changing to English did nothing here. That's good to know. Then I'll just go to apple.com. So if let's close that. Let's look at the iMac here. So what you need to consider about that iMac, unfortunately, is that why? Oh, pre-ordering. Okay, that's interesting. So that still doesn't count as ordering because it only comes out tomorrow, I guess. So at $1,299, you're not getting full ports. You're getting 2 ports rather than 4. And you have the Bint M4, right? You have 2 E-cores disabled and you have 2 GPU cores disabled. You do not have an Ethernet port, right? Now, you do not have Touch ID on the Magic Keyboard. That being said, of course, with the Mac Mini, you don't get any Magic Trackpad or keyboard. So at least that's kind of included. Let's say their combined value is $150. But now you would actually have to look at this configuration because the Mac Mini does have Ethernet, right? So let's take away the accessories, right? Now that version is kind of $1,349 or something like that, right? So that $1,299 config, it's really, really hard. And you would also have to consider it also only gives somewhat decent value in comparison to the Mac Mini if you have 0 accessories already, right? You have no external keyboard. You don't want another keyboard than Apple's keyboard, which, by the way, for all my love of Apple's keyboard keys, there is the gigantic issue that it doesn't have any backlight. And again, if you get the cheap version, you get it without Touch ID. Also, you have to pay a little extra to get the much better, in my opinion, Magic Trackpad versus the Magic Mouse. Where is it? Here, $50 extra. That's still cost. So while with the Mac Mini, if you buy a Magic Trackpad, even if you keep like an old Lightning Magic Trackpad or something like that, or of course you buy a mouse for like around $100 and $120, that accessory, you will be able to use it with this Mac Mini and the next Mac Mini and probably the Mac Mini after that. While with the iMac, you would have the issue that I had with my iMac, which is at the point where I wanted new accessories, I didn't want a new Mac, right? So I bought like at that point the Lightning Magic Keyboard and Trackpad, but then I still had my battery powered, actually, like, you know, those very old designs, because my original iMac was a late 2012 model. Yeah, with the Mac Mini, you are completely disconnected from that. You want new accessories, you buy them. You want a new Mac, you buy it. You want a new screen, you buy it. Here, you get it all in one package, and if one thing is either already something you already have, then you're kind of paying extra for something you don't need, or you're buying something that isn't improved. Let's say you desperately need a performance improvement, right? And you had the M1 Mac Mini and just, oh, the M4 is so much better. But now you also want a better screen. Well, guess what? That screen is the exact same one as on the M1. Or if you just want a better screen, right? now you also have to pay more for that extra chip and something like that. While if you still have an M1 or an M2 Mac Mini, well, you can still connect any Thunderbolt screen to it, any HDMI 2.0 display. Nowadays, if you buy this one, you can use HDMI 2.1 displays. If you buy the M4 Pro Mac Mini, you will be able to use Thunderbolt 5 displays and accessories. Well, with the iMac, you always have to buy all of that simultaneously. And while that does make sense if you upgrade like every 7 or 8 years, by that point, usually the screen is different. The accessories are at least marginally different. Your old accessories might even be like gunked up. Like I had the misfortune of putting my keyboard, because I used it for a time with my iPad at university, just connecting it over Bluetooth. And I had a banana in my backpack, and I didn't have one of those great banana cases, so that banana just got smushed into my Magic Keyboard. That almost killed it. I tried cleaning it over time, but by the time I sort of got it to work, I had like keyboards for my iPad anyway, and I gave away my iMac, and I did have still my old keyboard that I gave away with it. So yeah, just saying that the iMac, while I do appreciate the all-in-one design and the convenience of it all, it does have that issue of like you always buy everything at once. iMac is a non-starter with 60 hertz for Kevchata, and I actually agree with part of that is actually iMac 5K. When was that new display controller? Was it 2014? That's all it does. Google is so shit at servicing like older news. First 5K iMacs, okay. Yeah, late 2014 is when we got the first 5K, so the same pixel density as we have on the current 24-inch iMac. Basically the same like brightness levels and stuff like that. Was 2 years after I got my iMac, so it did have some nice things, but it was also pretty expensive here in Europe. Do they have like the screen brightness or something like that? I think even like the screen brightness is still basically the same, like around 500 nits. Like this, like Apple was so ambitious when they made this, and I'm not even asking for higher pixel density. I'm fine with 220 ppi on large screens. I'm fine with 260 on my MacBook, 250 on my MacBook, 260 on my iPad. I would love at some point a flex where the iPad goes like 4096 by 3072 with 400 ppi. I think that would be basically end game. It would basically prevent anyone from seeing pixels, but I also know that that would cost battery life, cost some performance, and Apple doesn't like that. But with the iMac, I'm like, you started making 120 hertz screens, LTPO by the way, on the iPad in 2017. Then you made the iPad much, much cooler even in 2018 with the redesign. You started adding mini LED screens and ProMotion to MacBooks on 2021. So why in hell is the current iMac that was just updated still basically having most of the display specs? Yeah, I think it has like more color vibrancy or something like that. Like it might be like it covers DCI-P3 rather than just sRGB. Like, why is it limited in that way? Like, it's literally a decade at this point. So yeah, I agree here with Kevchata. I don't think that 60 hertz as a base configuration would be completely unacceptable. I'm just asking, why is there at least not a 27-inch iMac with a 5K 120 hertz screen? Even without mini LED, without tandem OLED, without super advanced XDR screen stuff. Like, why? It's a little weird.
Now, you can obviously also upgrade from the base Mac Mini. but I don't think you should. And I'll explain why. See,
He is correct almost. And he should really preface this by saying that you should use external storage with that Mac Mini if you really don't plan on upgrading it. Because I do think people will be disappointed if they just order the Mac Mini. They have no idea of connecting an external storage device to it. I think those people will be disappointed over a period of time. Once again, I say I do know a lot of people who do most of their stuff through web services and things like that. So I fully understand there is room here for people to just be happy with 256. But Apple knows why they put in 256 is so that most people buy at least the 512 gig version. Kev Chat, a side note, what's a good keyboard for iPad Air besides Magic Keyboard case? I have ESR case that I like because of all different angles. If you're happy with one exclusive keyboard, like a keyboard that is exclusive to your device, right? Then I actually have a really good answer here because that's one that I use. Now, it does have some durability issues, unfortunately. Like it, this is that keyboard on my iPad Pro. I hope the camera catches it. Like you can see that the sides here started falling apart, so I just cut them off because they were like protruding a ridiculous amount. But now even where I cut it off, which was here, so at that point that was still flat, it's already protruding. So that's one issue with it, unfortunately. However, Logitech iPad Air, I always like that combo touch thing because in my opinion, I'll just open the German website. At this point, I don't care. I'll just have to do something in my devices that always opens up like US websites or something like that. Even though everything in my device, except for literally my location and of course my ISP, is set to like American English and shit like that. So yeah, that one. Can I just see it? So yeah, it does protect your device from all angles, basically. It does have a nice kickstand, and it has a pretty good trackpad, not as good as in the new Magic Keyboard on the iPad Pro. But don't forget, the Magic Keyboard that you get for the current iPad Air is still one with that small trackpad. So while it's not a Force Touch trackpad, it's still a very, very good trackpad for the size of the product. And you can of course disconnect this, so it routes the connection from like those 3-pin like Pong. I always forget the name of those connectors, right? It routes it here, which if you always disconnect it and you don't clean the bottom, that can be some connectivity issue, but usually it's not. The kickstand is very, very good. Like it's extremely durable. Mine has lasted me now for several years, and it works at basically every angle from perfectly open to like perfectly closed. So that's something the Magic Keyboard doesn't give you. In that way, it's way better than even like the Surface solution, because yes, the Surfaces have a great hinge and a great kickstand that also works at all angles, but the difference here is that you also get, of course, like the protection, right? Yeah, so in my this is what I would go for, but I did warn you about some of the durability. Tipo Master, I'd agree, and I also advise base plus hang off your own storage, but is the 256 gigabytes slower this time? No. I don't think so. There has not been testing on a 256 gigabyte model, but I also don't think that Apple would just repeat that mistake. Don't forget, they already rectified it in the past, so I doubt they would try to make that same mistake again. Kev Chat, I don't think Logitech has keyboard case for the iPad Air M1. I'm absolutely certain it does have it. That's the iPad Air. Oh, they only have M2? Wait, what did the iPad Air 5th generation have? Is that... Wait, why? That's such a weird omission. Is that... Wait, is that Folio Touch for iPad Air 11 inches? Oh, that's one... I believe that one is permanently connected. That's a shame. Wait, what about the iPad Pro version, though? Like, is that compatible? because the thicker, older iPad Pro basically has the same dimensions, so you would only end up with like a slightly too large hole. Keyboard cases. So iPad Air. Did they really not have something for iPad Air M1? Oh, they might not have stuff on the website, right? Oh, that's a shame. The Logitech combo has only a horizontal angle. Yeah, yeah. That's so bad because it's such an easy slam dunk of a choice. Maybe you can find something similar. Damn, that really leaves you though in no man's land because everything else has it. That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. I guess they only woke up to the potential of the iPad Air by the time it came to the M2 generation. Wait, which one is iPad Air 5th generation? iPad Air. That's the A14 version, right? 64 gigs, 20 watts. No, wait. No. The 5th generation is the M1 chip generation. So they just worded it weirdly. No, the iPad Air 5th generation is supported. The iPad Air 5th generation for that is actually the M1 generation. So and it's actually iPad Air 4th and 5th generation. Yeah, so does that one have any big downsides? No, it still fully disconnects. It has that empty space. The kickstand goes into any direction, and the hole is even appropriately sized. Kevchata, here, I found you the solution. I don't know why I switched to Italian again. Would you use USB-C Magic Keyboard with iPad Air? Use it mostly on couch. Well, yeah, of course I would. I love Apple's like regular Magic accessories for the Mac. And obviously they do give you versatility because they're Bluetooth accessories. You can connect it to basically anything. Yeah. It depends obviously a little bit like just how you sit. Like if you use it on your couch, I would assume you would at least have like a giant pillow to put everything on top to balance it, because just trying to balance it all on your lap like put it on like a small kickstand in front of you or something like that, but yeah, or like a chair or something. So yeah, absolutely. I would still again argue that Apple's Magic keyboards do have that problem with like, but I guess for the money they are not terrible. So accessories here, Mac accessories. This is the 199 version. Is there a smaller version, please? Really? That's the only Magic keyboard that cannot be the only Magic keyboard Apple sells. Okay, have you seen the ASR combo for iPad Air? It has so many available angles. Yeah, but that angle, like that, what I showed you on Logitech, that one has all the angles as well. ESR iPad Air keyboard? What would it be? Is it also like a keyboard case? Yeah, I guess. Oh, yeah, it's basically like a Magic keyboard alternative. To be honest, though, I do not know enough about it, so I don't know what the user experience of people has been. I just know that yeah, people see it as a better value, like Magic keyboard. Um, at that point though, don't listen to me, listen to like reviews. That's what I would tell you, because I'm not sure. Like when I see devices that are 3 times lower priced than Apple's solution, while I do not say that I know Apple's profit margins are high, I always ask like, what were the compromises to get you there, right? But it doesn't seem bad, and I know that ESR as a company by itself is also a good company, so I don't think they would actively like cheat you or anything. Yeah, but let's continue actually with the review.
Apple is known for building what I've called a price ladder and just trying to get you to climb as high as possible. They do this across all their products, but there's basically always a really tempting upgrade sitting right
My
above
ESR
the
doesn't
base
have
model.
keyboard. I guess you mean it would just be like, what would it be, like a folio? Where was that? So that's all keyboard stuff. iPad, keyboard. Where? Oh, it would just be protection stuff. So iPad Air 15 4th gen. What would it be? Does it have a name? Do you mean like something like this? There are always keyboards here, so I'm actually not sure. Or something like this, I guess. That looks very creative with how many angles it has. And yeah, that one is just $30. So I guess that is also isn't bad as like even like an impulse purchase or something like that. That being said, though, Kevchata, I do have to get back to the actual review. But thank you for participating, for asking.
And then when you spend that money, you're kind of right underneath another tempting upgrade. And then they kind of walk you up trying to get you to spend as much money as possible. It's really smart. They do it with iPhones and with iPads and with everything else. This base Mac Mini, I'm telling you, is a good deal, but it only has 256 gigs of storage. And many people are fine with that and they can live with that. That's great. But if you know you're going to be working with a lot of media, a lot of video, then you start looking at upgrades to the storage. And that's where you'll find that walking it up to a terabyte costs $400 more. Or if you plan to
and
do
that's, by the way, that's not even the super fast, like 8 gigabytes per second storage. That will still be 3.5 to 4 gigabytes per second. That is 8 times the market price.
Wired networking, bumping it up to 10 gig Ethernet costs 100.
Yeah, at least with gigabit Ethernet, though, I would argue that it makes sense to charge a little bit more for like a niche use case thing. Like $50 would be like more an appropriate price, but given that it's integrated into the device, you're kind of paying a little bit extra for the convenience. With storage, you're literally paying Apple more money because Apple likes money.
More dollars on top of that. For the price of just those upgrades, you could almost get an entire another Mac Mini. It's crazy. Like basically across the board, Apple's upgrade pricing is pretty crazy with this computer, which is why I'm specifically saying the base model is such a good...
One thing that I don't like, and that's one thing that I will tell you people here is, and that is one thing that I actually think goes against Apple here. So I'm not here like kissing their ass. Mac Mini, okay, cool website. Can I please go to the pre-order page? So on the Mac Mini, let's forget storage for a second. We've talked enough about using external storage and stuff like that. Now, 24 gigs of memory here. I do believe that Apple hurt themselves here by not unifying the 24 and 32 gigabyte things and maybe charge $300 for it, or $200 or even $250 would have been way better, right? But $400 paying on, given the M4 chip, other limitations, like, I know the idea is like, oh, if you need a little bit more memory, we are going to charge you an arm and a leg for that little bit more memory. So I think honestly you should stay on 16 gigabytes here. But then the other point is, and that one is a little bit smarter done here, and that is on the M4 Pro Mac Mini. Let's look at here. Honestly, on that one, upgrading RAM, it's like, you see, they charge an arm and a leg here again for 24 gigabytes of memory. Though it is better value, by the way, per gigabyte than they charge you for the 8 gigabyte. So they clearly can charge you a little less. But then here, they actually start charging suddenly a very reasonable amount. This is the similar like thing what I've said about Ethernet, where, oh, it is probably still way above market pricing, but $200 for 16 gigs of memory is not terrible, especially considering this is also like LPDDR5X memory. It really is a decent amount, right? Getting 16 gigabytes extra could be game changing given your use case. Plus, again, you do have the unified memory advantage. So if you are doing like GPU intensive tasks on your M4 Pro Mac Mini, which you're more likely to do on your M4 Pro Mac Mini than you are on your M4 Mac Mini, that is a good upgrade. But before that, you have to pay the worst value for 24 gigabytes at $400, right? So, and I honestly do believe that at the current pricing, it will hold people back from buying 48 gigabyte configurations, even though, again, the 48 gigabyte configuration is at least better value still than going from 16 to 32 for 400, right? But this is a price that Apple can charge to pros, right? Because for a pro, paying $400 more for memory is actually not that crazy. Like NVIDIA, I always forget how it's Quattro. Prince Sonamne, a Mac Mini 16 gig 512 is what is selling at least in India, then 256 gigabyte version. Rest are in shop. Yeah, don't forget though that the other versions are really split, right? Some people will buy the 1 terabyte model with 32 gigabytes. Some will buy it with 24 gigabytes. Some will keep it at 16. So there's more versatility between those configurations. I think everyone who keeps it at 256 gigabytes will stay on 16 gigs of RAM. And I think the vast majority who upgrade to 512 gigabytes will still keep 16 gigabytes. That's why those configurations are a little bit easier to sell out of, while other configurations are probably just a drop in the bucket of all those different configurations that you could be having. But the reason why I mentioned like crazy memory pricing, right? What is the cost? Do they not have desktop workstations, professional notebooks, desktop work? This has to be like all that Quadro stuff, right? Yeah, now buy. Oh my God, I have to go through somebody else. My God, please no. NVIDIA Quadro. Okay, that's how it's written. Pricing. So that's Ada. That's 16 gigabytes for 2000. This is it really not give like an explainer page somewhere? Yeah, by the way, here, so 48 gigabytes of memory on a GPU. That GPU doesn't even have the fastest GDDR6 memory, by the way. But if you want more memory to work on the more intensive tasks, you're getting below 4090 performance, below 4090 bandwidth, but because you are getting a lot more memory, that's double the memory that you get in a 4090, you're paying now 3 times the price of a 4090. So those are the people that Apple is basically trying to reach with 48 and 64 gigabyte memory Mac Minis. This is why it doesn't make sense to me the way they try to price the base Mac Mini by trying to basically say, oh, we are charging the same RAM pricing, even higher actually, on the lowest model. Even though those people are not as dire in need of memory, they will not pay us that premium. So in my opinion, they should have combined the 24 and 32 gigabyte upgrades into one 32 gigabyte upgrade and priced it either at the price of the 24 gigabyte model, or if you want to be a little bit more greedy, price it at $300. So yeah, that is one thing where I do believe, by the way, like for example, Princess Navane, you're saying, oh, the other configurations are like easily available. Yeah, that's partially because anyone asking to buy you a 24 gigabyte Mac Mini in general on the base version is already asking you a lot, right? Like this configuration here, like really, why do I need 24 gigabytes on Mac Mini if at that point, sure, I'm paying a lot more here. I'm paying $400 more for the same amount of memory and storage as this configuration, but I am getting that huge performance increase. Like the gap between M4 and M4 Pro, even the binned M4 Pro, is pretty huge. I'm getting Thunderbolt 5 and stuff like that. That storage is actually faster. That memory is actually faster. Again, while this is a high upgrade cost, I would argue for pros it's very much worth it. But even this $200 upgrade is not worth for regular consumers. While if this was 32 gigabytes, I think that would be a slam dunk. And even if this was 32 gigabytes at $10.99, I still think it would have been decent. So yeah, this is where I think Apple is just shooting themselves in the foot. They're just being a little too greedy, in my opinion. But granted, they did create like a computer that is now being called one of the best values ever. So they're probably trying to capitalize on that by selling people up on like not so valuable upgrade options, because they're saying, oh, it might not be like the best value ever anymore, but it's still not terrible. Unless you buy like a how much would you have to pay extra here? So, 2 terabytes, 32 gigabytes. That is where I would argue it gets into the poor value territory, because at that point you probably would want a significant performance increase at that price point. It's over 3 times the base price, even with education pricing. And with education pricing, it gets even crazier.
Good deal. And actually, if you're lucky enough to have a .edu email address right now, the student discount drops it down to $4.99, which is sick. But once you know you're going to be doing upgrades to the pre-purchase spec, which you have to know before buying it because you can't upgrade it after the fact, all the memory, everything is built in.
Yeah, but this is why I'm saying for a desktop computer using external storage, like even like a cheap Samsung thing, or for example, to bring it back actually to my PS5 Pro that I mentioned in the past, right? When the PS5 came out, NVMe for PCIe 4 storage was still relatively expensive. So the SSD that I have here is actually like a Seagate, I believe it's a FireCuda 530, right? It's the full 7 gigabits per second. It has like super long warranty. And I believe it cost me like $380, which is still better than the storage pricing Apple charges today. And that was from 4 years ago, basically, or 3 years. I didn't get my PS5 Pro on the day first. Plus, I do have like the custom heatsink on top, right? So let's say it was $400 for 2 terabytes. You can buy external storage like that, and then you can buy like a USB-C or Thunderbolt enclosure for it, and that one will give you the best value in the industry, basically, and the potential to go really, really crazy. So by the time I might sell like my PS5 Pro, even I will, if this SSD still works, and I assume it will, I will just be able to put that into like basically a custom SSD drive and use it as external storage, and it will be great value. It will still be super fast. So there is a lot of versatility if you go with external storage. Obviously, you can go completely ham and build like your own NAS, your own home server solutions and stuff like that. But I don't recommend that to everyone. Prince Anavna, I agree here. I was looking into get one under $1,000 for 32 gigabytes and 512 gigs SSD, but they want $1,400 to $1,500 USD. I'm not paying for that. Yeah, I fully understand that. Relay, hi Mark, hi Relay. Let's continue.
Then it becomes more of a normal deal. I do want to say this though. So the third and final crazy thing about this Mac Mini is that the maxed out version has a case for the best portable workstation Mac.
True.
Now, this doesn't apply to everybody. This is coming from me, someone who used to drag an iMac Pro in a Pelican case through the airport to events because it was the fastest editing machine that I could reasonably travel with. And it actually made sense for me. So Coming from that perspective, this new Mac Mini is sick. So
Yeah, I guess you would still have to find a screen solution for that, but you can buy like a 14-inch external monitor for cheap. And I mean, like, by monitor, like one of those portable ones. Granted, they won't have the color science necessary to just make make your video really well, but maybe if you already know the presets you have to change, you can kind of get by with that. Plus, you send that file once to like the your iPad or something like that with tandem OLED, verify how good it looks on there. You can even, of course, use that as a reference device, right, with as an external monitor for your Mac. So I don't think you can connect the Mac Mini just by default to the iPad. That would be pretty sick. It would be a pretty small screen, but would be pretty cool. So I wonder what he would use for an external solution.
Looking at the Mac Studios, those aren't upgraded to M4 yet. They've all got the M2 generation, and it's also not going to be the Mac Pro, which is also still on the M2 generation and obviously not portable. The iMac is on M4, but there's no Pro chips, so it's just the base M4 chip. So this Mac Mini is the easiest way to pack an M4 Pro chip with you and just throw it in a travel bag super easily. An equivalent spec MacBook Pro with M4 Pro starts at $2,000, which is actually another decently good deal as far as performance. But
True.
if you don't need a laptop, or if you just want to plug and play into
Prince Ananda, I'm gonna
monitors
try that
wherever
iPad
you
on
go,
Mac Mini. Yeah, please do. Well, the problem is I know that the iPad doesn't easily accept like external screens, but maybe you could do that. Like even as like a virtual, like this, like an external display, similar to how I can use my iPad with my MacBook Pro as an extra monitor, not just obviously for continuity stuff. For example, you can see I'm moving my mouse here. When it disappears, that means it just entered my iPad, which is fantastic. But I do mean, like, actually, I need to know that iPad as Mac Mini screen. Can that work? Use your iPad as a Mac Mini monitor. The ultimate Mac Mini and iPad Pro setup. I guess. But we can look into some of those videos maybe after. I know it works easily with the MacBook Pro, but I need something that works by default every time, right? Otherwise, if I always have to troubleshoot some of those wireless screen solutions, I don't need that hassle.
$1399 gets you the M4 Pro Mac Mini, and that upgrade also gets you the back Thunderbolt ports being Thunderbolt 5 instead of Thunderbolt 4, so it can support 3 6K displays instead of 2. So I've had and been testing the M4 Pro here with 48 gigs of memory, and fun fact, if you run through some synthetic benchmarks, this runs up the highest CPU score of any desktop Mac ever. That includes the Mac Pro and the Mac Studios.
Oh,
and all
true.
of them.
Yeah, that's because the M4 Max right now is MacBook Pro exclusive. So yeah, even those almost 23,000 points and like Geekbench 6 multi-core, that's higher than what the M2 Ultra delivers.
This is by far the most powerful single core we've ever seen, by a lot. And then multi-core just barely tops Geekbench's all-time Mac list. Though as we know, CPU doesn't really bump up all that much when you go from base to Pro to Max to Ultra.
That's actually, well, yeah, the single core doesn't, but this time there is a huge CPU gap, like from M4 to M4 Pro. Like on M3 to M3 Pro, that was not such a huge uplift. It was 4 plus 4 cores, 4P 4E cores, to basically 50% exactly more cores. Now you can get up to 10 P cores on the Mac Mini M4 Pro, while you tab out at 4 P cores on the M4. Now you do get a small reduction of E cores, but who really cares at that point?
It's way more GPU stuff. And so when you look at GPU benchmarks, the most powerful Mac Mini here with the M4 Pro, it was putting up M1 Max numbers, which again shows how much these generations over time have been improving and stacking on top of each other. I've been editing videos on an M1 Max laptop.
And again, that is raw compute. the M1 Max, the M2 Max don't have hardware accelerated ray tracing. They don't have mesh shading. They don't have support for Apple's dynamic caching. So if you're doing stuff like 3D rendering or you're gaming, however little games there might be, you are better off arguably with the M4 Pro than you would be with the chip that I have, the M1 Max.
3 years now on the MacBook Pro. So this Mac Mini feels like one of those impossibly small computers Apple's like always kind of wanted to make, even before Apple Silicon. Like you probably remember some of their earlier attempts, like the trash can Mac Pro. No doubt they wanted to do something crazy. They wanted to put a workstation class computer on the desk cooled by a single fan. We saw how that went with the Intel chip.
I mean, yeah, the cooling was never the problem with the Mac. Well, with the exact chips that it had, the problem was going forward. Obviously, Intel chips really only started scaling up with more cores and more clock speeds as they hit the 14 nanometer limit for years and years. So that thermal design was never bad. It's just that we didn't have chips to improve. Though, in a way, this is pretty much the Mac Studio, but slightly differently designed, right? The Mac Studio has an SoC rather than a separate GPU. That's why it doesn't need like the separate motherboard for stuff like this. The thermal designs can be a little bit even like less impressive than just one huge fan. Granted, it does have one big fan because Apple Silicon is further more efficient, plus 3 nanometer and everything else like that. Well, even the Mac Studio right now is still on the 5 nanometer chip, but you know what I mean. So the I/O is not as crazy as the Apple even tried for back in the day. So yeah, this is basically the precursor to the Mac Studio. It's unfortunate that they called it Mac Pro. It's unfortunate they tried to price it more like a Mac Pro, but it was never a bad machine. It was a little over-engineered, if anything.
Chip inside, or even some of those razor-thin i9 MacBook Pros that started having overheating issues. Yep. But now that Apple Silicon has gotten this good and this efficient over time, they're actually able to make tiny, powerful computers like the Mac Studio and now like this little Mac Mini over here. Nobody was asking for the Mac Mini to be even smaller, except for those people in the spaceship campus somewhere in California.
It's a good flex.
Well played. Well played.
So, very good review here. We looked at some of official benchmarks. So, let me quickly look. iPad as Mac Mini monitor. Okay. That's from 1 year ago. Nope, that looks too complicated. That's why is it all German? Use your iPad as a Mac Mini monitor. 100.
Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how you can use your iPad screen as the monitor for a Mac Mini. And the reason I like doing this is I love iPads. They're great. They have a great monitor built, portable system. I'm not talking about a battery system. So we're going to actually plug this into the wall. So you'll need the power cord that came with your Mac Mini. Then of course you'll need to get the video out. So I have a short HDMI cable that
that's with that adapter. That's how the iPad can receive like a Nintendo Switch input.
So we have our power and we have our HDMI cable here. The key to getting it onto your iPad is that we want to have video input into the iPad.
Okay, so that way it just becomes a full-on monitor. It's unfortunate. It's not a solution to just plug in USB-C to USB-C and use it basically as an extra monitor, because that would require one primary monitor. Yeah, I think that's a use case that would be pretty cool.
What if I told you that you could use your Mac Mini completely portable? Or how about using Mac OS and Final Cut Pro with touchscreen? I'm talking out and about in the woods portable.
Hopefully a dust filter adapter is released too. For which device? Yeah, I think you can pretty easily clean maybe the dust by, I don't know, like there have been no like openings of the Mac Mini. If maybe you just open up the bottom, you just quickly clean it out, shouldn't be too difficult.
Road portable. Oh, I'm sorry. What is up guys, my name is Dosif Hussain and today we're going to be talking about how you can make your Mac Mini completely portable and on the go. In fact, you can use this to pair with your iPad and basically use any iPad as a portable monitor for your computer. Pretty cool. Now keep in mind, this also works with the Mac Studio. Now this is definitely a unique use case situation. I see this being handy mostly for people who have like a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio, but
that was a pretty big Mac Mini, but now it looks pretty big, doesn't it?
They want the occasional portability with it. Firstly, let's talk about what you're gonna need exactly in order to get this whole thing going.
Guys, we have almost 20 people watching, which I honestly didn't expect after 2 hours of streaming. Please do all the YouTube jazz, like the video, share it out to anybody who think might enjoy it. Comment, I love interacting with your comments. You can see that so many new people joining the community. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so, and if you want to support this channel directly, leave a small donation in the form of a super chat or super sticker. Become a channel member, or support Rove on Patreon. So plenty of ways to engage, to agree with, to disagree with, to support. So however you want to do it, that's up to you.
You're gonna need to make sure you're subbed to this channel. Just kidding, but that would be nice. It would make my day for sure. So number one, first thing you're gonna need, of course, is a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio, an iPad Pro. We're doing something like this because which is gonna be absolutely. Next, we're gonna need something to actually hold the iPad while we're working.
Okay, so he does directly connect it here.
So that brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Banks. What immediately stands out to me about the stand is the screen, but also extra or accessories to make this.
I can see there's also like a Pitaka thing for that. Nufi bar keyboard. Okay, he does go through every accessory. That's why this is like
in your hand. Okay, for the next item, we're actually going to need an item to actually power the Mac Mini. Now, because the Mac Mini does need an AC plug point, an AC port, it's also really well built, and it's also got a flashlight in here in case if you ever need it. You can push a lot of
so
this entire situation work is this, which is the Luna display.
Okay, that's Luna display. That's how he suggests
Hey
it.
everybody,
So
in this video, I'm going to show
I think Apple should make that very, very much like default so that it's easy to use, especially if you use a Thunderbolt cable. You would basically be connecting it to what, like 6 million pixel screen running at 120 hertz. That's absolutely in the standard, especially of Thunderbolt 5. Even Thunderbolt 4 though shouldn't be an issue, given that you can do 6K, which is what, how many pixels is that? 8K is 32 million pixels, 5K is 14. So it's around 20 or higher. So yeah, that should be no problem with running iPad screen at 120 hertz. So, but I actually did want to look into some other reviews here. I have some other stuff pre-downloaded. I have the Tech Chap. Like, did Mr. Who's the Boss though do something? Mr. Who's the Boss. Like, he doesn't do too much Mac stuff. My last video here, I'd never believed those videos. So time for some change. Oh, he probably is changing like his location. That's always so stupid. Such clickbait. Not clicking on that. Sorry. Purchased the Samsung Viewfinity S9 for the M4 Mac Mini, hoping it's plug and play with no issue. Is that a 5K panel? The Viewfinity S9. Viewfinity S9. Yeah, it's a 5K panel. Yeah, you shouldn't have any issues with that, right? It's 5K at 27 inches. So it's basically like a cheaper version of Apple Studio Display. I've heard it might have some uniformity issue with how, like, where it gets bright and where it doesn't. But yeah, it's a good choice. You won't have scaling issues. Thunderbolt is plenty for that connection. Yeah, good choice. Wait, it has a mini display port. Wait, does it not? Does it support Thunderbolt? It has no HDMI. Does it support Thunderbolt? Yeah, it's the Thunderbolt 4 monitor. Okay, that's nice, I guess. So, I would like to react to a MacBook Pro review, and right now there isn't that much. So Brian Tong, who I like from back in the day, still, like, he has a Mac Mini review, but again, we just watch Marquez. He does have unboxing videos. iJustine is usually not my go-to here. So I guess I can briefly look who does it. M4 MacBook Pro. So I just seen Apfelwelt here in Germany. Dave 2D. You know what? I might actually like, given that it's just 6 minutes, I'm actually gonna watch this. Let's say at 1440p. My Wi-Fi should be good enough. And let's see how good it is. You see, I'm not subscribed, but that's because I'm very, very picky with my subscriptions. I just hate getting too many notifications and stuff like that. I still like Dave.
M4 MacBook Pros. This is their 14-inch model, and it's equipped with the M4 Max, their top-end configuration, and it also has their new nano texture on the screen. It's a texture that's designed to cut down reflections. It's the first time they've actually had it on one of their laptops. But I want to do a quick video here that kind of goes over the important things that I think you should be aware of when it comes to this device. And the first thing I want to talk about is performance. The CPU gains are quite good year on year, but it's particularly impressive.
Logic
that
Protects. Okay, we're probably gonna watch like MaxTech reviews next week. I already told that in the beginning of the video. Like, I'm going away on the weekend to celebrate my birthday. Maybe tomorrow evening I'll actually have some time to stream once I get there, but definitely not on Saturday or on Sunday. So I apologize for that. So here on the M4 Max with 128 gigabyte, even it's basically even with the M2 Ultra. You see that the M4 Pro, that might be just a memory issue, because the M3 Max here has also 128 gigabytes, or maybe a bandwidth problem. But yeah, the problem is that these tests are as unaligned as possible, because you do have 128 gigabytes for the Max. Probably would have been nicer to have 192 gigabytes on the M2 Ultra to see if that actually overcomes any bottlenecks. And then here you have the M2 Max with just 32 gigs. That's just bad. And finally put to rest my present machine, the 2015 iMac 3.5 gigahertz quad-core Intel Core i5 with 24 gigabytes of DDR3. It plays my 4K videos with stutter and slowdown presently. Well, that's bad. That's probably an hard drive issues at that point. Because I don't see why it would struggle with just 4K playback. Oh, maybe it just struggles really with VP9 on YouTube. That could be it. But yeah, it really shouldn't struggle too much.
Max can outperform the M2 Ultra in a lot.
Okay, Xcode WebKit. We do have some other tests here. Shorter is better, right? So and the shortest is actually the M4 Max, even shorter than the M2 Ultra. But you see the gains from M3 Max are not that crazy. What is crazy is just how close the M3 Max already got to the M2 Ultra. And this is, we're talking Xcode. So this was a task that was optimized for Apple's chips.
Benchmarks and workflows. And
okay, 3 terabyte Fusion drive. I had the 3 terabyte Fusion drive on my late 2012 iMac. So yeah, maybe I honestly don't remember too much of my iMac at this point, because I used my iPad for so many things. Like once I got that A7 iPad Air, it was just so fast and fluid. And then I got the A9X iPad Pro, and I just never really looked back at my iMac too much. I used it for some tasks. I had like a Windows installed on it through Boot Camp. Then it became the only Mac, the 3 terabyte Fusion drive, late 2012 iMac, specifically my Mac. Then in its last software versions, didn't support Boot Camp anymore for some reason. I vaguely remember the reason, but not fully. So that's like, it's an interesting story with old Intel hardware, like how it ages. Like granted, my iMac never had like thermal issues, even with like the dedicated GPU inside. But yeah, like I upgraded the RAM from 8 eventually to 16 gigabytes. With Apple Silicon, it just all feels much more finished, right? Or finite, if you want to put it in more negative terms, right? You get it and you know what you get it. You pretty much can expect it to perform well for like video watching and basic web browsing in perpetuity. Even the 8 GB RAM system, unless you're doing something in the background, should probably always work nicely with even like 4K video. So yeah, it's interesting to see how different Intel machines have aged over time.
The GPU gains on the M4 Pro are decent, but the GPU gains on the M4 Max are very impressive.
What does he compare it to? He does not have an M3 Pro to compare it to. That's unfortunate because the gains from M3 Pro to M4 Pro are bigger than the one from M3 Max to M4 Max. So I don't even know what gains he's talking about with the M4 Pro because he doesn't have an M3 Pro or M2 Pro in there. So that's GFX Bench. GFX Bench is completely outdated as a benchmark. It's terrible. It likes basically bandwidth. This is why the 800 gigabits per second like M2 Ultra will win even with its terrible scaling over the M4 Max. It's not a great test. Just saying that. Blender, that is of course helped by hardware ray tracing acceleration, starting with the M3 generation. This is why M3 Max here outperforms the M2 Ultra, the M4 Max. This is one thing that does, though, like, it doesn't worry me, but I wonder because Apple did promise that the M4 GPUs are twice as fast in ray tracing than the M3 GPUs. So I wonder if we are hitting some kind of other bottleneck, maybe bandwidth. So that would be interesting. And then M4 Pros basically like exactly have the performance here of the M4 Max. So that's actually pretty good scaling. MP4 is where I'm seeing my playback issues from my imported cameras. Oh, well, it might be a high quality MP4 file. Yeah, but it could be.
Macs are very impressive. Most GPU-bound apps and games will get a nice bump up from this, plus the ray tracing capabilities are better, so apps and games can take advantage of that. The thing I'm most impressed by, though, is how good...
You're giving me here, like, Mist, which, by the way, with a metal overlay, you could have given me the exact performance, but you gave me GFX Bench, couldn't even give me like the latest version of the 3D Mark benchmark. Come on, Dave.
The M4 Max GPU is compared to the previous generation, especially at a very similar thermal envelope. Like if you think about the competitors in the space, like AMD, NVIDIA, when they come out with laptop GPUs, typically the new models also come with like an increase in power requirement.
Yeah,
right?
that is also my prediction for Blackwell. Well, we pretty much know because every leaker says it. That RTX 5090 will be like a 550 watt GPU versus the RTX 4090 being like a 450 watt GPU. So it will be interesting what that means for laptop parts, because even if we assume, let's say, 15% higher efficiency at the same power or something like that, if you really want to deliver like a generational boost, don't forget, it's not a 1 year gap like we have from M3 Max to M4 Max, but at this point we're well over 2 years into the RTX 40 generation. So if they really want to deliver a proper generational uplift, that's kind of like you would have to give it 20% more power across the board. And we have 120 watts dedicated GPUs on laptop. Could we really hit 140, 150 watts there? That would be insane in my opinion.
Just like, 5 or 10 watts per year, but it adds up over the course of time.
Yep.
And on this device, if you think about the M1 Max to the M4 Max, the GPU has improved so much with very little increase in power consumption.
And that is 3 years, by the way. The M1 Max came out late 2021. Granted, it was based at that point on a 1-year-old architecture, but if we are talking just Apple playing around or experimenting with large dice, that is their first attempt. So M2 Max, not too much extra performance, though usually we kind of saw more like a 30% increase. This is like 20 pretty much exactly. So this uplift on the M3 Max is actually also nice. But yeah, and then we see a disproportionately large increase, especially considering that the node change actually happened here, right? We went from N5P to N3B. And here we are just jumping to N3E, which technically isn't even as dense as N3B, but it is more efficient. So the fact that Apple is leveraging so much, I know that peak power draw is probably increased a little bit, but the fact that the thermal envelope is still relatively the same, that the battery life in regular tasks is still basically the same, that is a good architectural improvement.
On this device are pretty much the same as last year's models.
Oh, okay. Again, GFX Bench sucks, so it probably doesn't draw the maximum amount of power that those chips can consume, but around 50 watts of GPU power draw, which again is less than half of what high-end solutions draw on Windows as dedicated GPUs. That's pretty good.
In terms of memory, the base configuration starts at 16 gigabytes now, thankfully, and they've also increased the memory bandwidth. It's noticeable already on the base models, but the Pro and Max chips get a significant boost in memory speed.
75% increase of M4 Pro versus M3 Pro.
For applications that lean on fast memory, you definitely notice a bump up this year. If I'm being honest though, it's difficult for me to tell how much of the gains that we're seeing this year come from the memory speed increase versus the CPU or the GPU increase. Like they're all tied together.
Yeah, that's SoC design, baby. That's the entire point. The entire point is it would be pointless to give the exact same CPU and GPU that much more bandwidth, but it also wouldn't really make sense to create a much better CPU and GPU architecture and then bottleneck it to a degree with older memory, even memory that wouldn't, even if it would be enough, right? It might not have the same timings. It might not have the same efficiency. So faster or even just newer memory just makes sense.
And I don't have the tools to lock memory speed on a MacBook, so it's tough to tell. I will say though,
I know some people are always saying that for like architectural comparisons, but for example, the fact that Intel supports faster memory than AMD this year, and AMD can give you more cache thanks to 3D cache on the X3D series processors, that is not accidental, right? Intel invested into a better memory controller. AMD invested into a die-to-die connection where they could actually put extra cache under the CPU chiplet, right? Those are not things that fall from the sky. Apple couldn't just with the snip of a finger potentially give you maybe way faster memory still. Like, I don't know if the memory controller could handle 10,700 megatransfers per second memory. I don't know if Apple could very easily add like an extra die as a chiplet to their chips, and I don't know if that would potentially only benefit the CPU or maybe the GPU. So it all has to be seen as one integral part. With AMD, you cannot even really disconnect the main CPU chiplet from their I/O chiplet die, because while they are very much separate things and they could technically improve one while keeping the other the same, well, as an end consumer, you get them in one package. You get them as one chip. So why do you care if they're technically disconnected? This is why I hate when people say like especially complete bullshit, like when they say, oh, AMX, which are Apple's AI accelerators for the CPU, right? That's where they also handle like scalable matrix executions for tasks like Geekbench 6. People will say, oh, it's completely unfair to test it because it's separate from the actual CPU cores, but you are able to test for some reason AVX 512 acceleration on x86 chips because that is technically part of the core. And I'm like, But if it's faster to build an extra core that sits right alongside the CPU, Apple, even in their explanations for the new architecture, always mentions the AMX accelerators as part of the CPU. Why should that not count? And this, I have the same problem. Like, nobody says that about NVIDIA, right? Nobody says NVIDIA has trash AI and GPU and ray tracing on their GPU cores because they bothered to create like AI tensor cores. They bothered to create separate RT cores, right? AMD integrated both better AI acceleration and RT into the main GPU shaders, right? But that doesn't mean that AMD is better than NVIDIA. In fact, at every such task, NVIDIA will likely outperform it. Just because you can technically disconnect those RT and AI cores from the main GPU shaders doesn't mean it's not part of one architecture. NVIDIA invested research and development for it. They invested into die size for those extra cores. They had to make sure that those cores can leverage all the cache that are part of the regular GPU cores, that they could access all the GPU memory bandwidth simultaneously. They had to make sure that the computation doesn't fall out of sync between the GPU cores for like the main rasterization of the game, the RT cores for the ray traced effects like shadows, reflections, and ambient occlusion, global illumination, and the AI cores because those handle, for example, DLSS and AI-based upscaling for the game. So creating an architecture where all those three core types on one memory bus can handle a task basically simultaneously is incredibly impressive, similar to how Apple's neural engine can simultaneously benefit from the AI accelerators at or on the CPU, the AMX, and the GPU. The fact that you combine all of it and run it simultaneously, still keep it pretty efficient, that's an accomplishment. The fact that there's one Core ML API that allows you to easily leverage that power as a developer, that's impressive. I hate nerds on the internet who are clearly have one side because look, I like Apple tech more, but I'm not here to make Apple artificially look good. Like, I don't need to lie to you that like, oh, the Apple's M4 Max GPU is actually better than the RTX 4090 mobile because it will outperform it when tested on battery. That's an interesting point, but I also know, well, the RTX 4090 mobile is designed for higher clock speeds and higher power draw. I'm not even sure if Apple completely overclocked the M4 Max, if there would be more power to be gained out of it. Maybe the architecture is just limited in that regard. So I'm just giving you data points, and I do try to interpret them, but never with the pre-gone conclusion of like, Apple best or something like that. I've had some comments like that on my Dimensity 9400 and my 8 Elite videos. People were just too stupid to understand. I wasn't even commenting as much on the chip as I was on some of my problems with Geekervan's methodology, and especially with the way they try to make conclusions based on artificial tests that then are countered by real world games and tests. And I'm like, wait, why are you giving me a conclusion based on an artificial benchmark? If you have better data that you just gave me here. So yeah, again, I could rant about this for days, guys.
So that if you have an older M1 or M2 or M3 MacBook Pro, I wouldn't upgrade because Apple's silicon performance progresses so fast year on year that it can pay off to just wait as long as you can before you buy new hardware. Okay, let's talk about the screen. So this particular device is running their new
By the way, I remember when people were just like saying, oh, M2 generation is like a stopgap or whatever bullshit.
Okay, let's talk about the screen. So this particular before you buy new hardware.
Where is it? Here, look. It's all increasing at a decent rate. This is on the same node. This was a new node. This is a more ambitious architecture or whatever, if you want to put it that way. It really it really, like, you should just wait, and then you can buy whatever you want, whatever is out at that time. The chips are fast enough and good enough. Do I think Apple will bring back the in-home AirPod to replace the present iCloud? No, and you kind of answered it yourself, which is that even if Apple were to bring you like a router with like an integrated home NAS or something like that, and basically made it easy to access, the problem is that it would cost them, like, it wouldn't cost them, but it would generate less money for them than making you pay for like 2 terabytes of iCloud. So plus I don't like the only reason why I could see that changing is if Apple creates a Wi-Fi module, a Wi-Fi modem that is so good that they think that it's competitive on the market, and that will allow them to price you very highly. Don't forget, but when we had Airport at that time, it was powered by hard drives. So not solid state storage. So how much would Apple charge you for that, for now that they inevitably would use SSD storage? Would they allow you to potentially connect an external drive to it that would give you even more storage at no extra cost? I really couldn't tell you. And part of that is also, by the time it comes to that, maybe Tim Cook won't be CEO, and maybe if John Turnus takes over, maybe there's a chance that Apple would create more products that are less like profit focused, and once every 5 years they give you like a new airport Extreme or something like that, because they just can afford it. They have enough engineers, and once every 4 or 5 years they throw like 10 engineers onto it, say like, oh, use our latest Wi-Fi modem or something like that, make it better, and we'll price it with like a 20% margin rather than a 40 or 50% margin. And maybe we'll allow people to just go ham by using external storage. But I honestly couldn't tell you. There are so many variables to that.
Can pay off to just wait as long as you can before you buy new hardware. Okay, let's talk about the screen. So this particular device is running their new nano texture finish, and it's finish we've seen on other devices before, right? Like their screens, the new iPads, and every time I've ever talked about that texture in a video, like a review video, I've been like, it's nice, but it's not all that special, at least not to me. But check this out. So
did they improve it for the MacBook? This looks way better than I remember it. Maybe it's that angle?
The laptop, the one on the
That's
left.
crazy good.
That is the nano texture. This
Really?
is a regular, like the glossy.
Man, with like combine that with 1,000 nits of brightness, that is going to be the best screen for like outdoor work that isn't like, you know, like a military device or something like that.
And I have an overhead light. Do you see the difference
in
the reflection? It's not just like a diffusion. It's a pretty distinct reduction in just light emittance.
Well, I mean, it is a diffusion. It's just it's so effective at that don't forget, if the angle is diffused to the point that you don't see the light, then that light is still being reflected, but it's just reflected at such an angle that it doesn't matter anymore.
I think, okay, when it came to the regular screens and the iPad, I even said this in my review of that.
Yeah,
like,
the iPad has a problem here, which is that the iPad, of course, has touchscreen as well. So there are different layers, right? The touch input layer, especially even one that is like optimized for the Apple Pencil, with, of course, the regular display. Then on top, nano texture results, in my opinion, in too much like visual distortion. But here, it just looks fantastic. Here in California, 7 gigabyte download costs a whopping $270 a month. Oh, you mean like 7 gigabyte speeds? Well, that's still amazing though. Like I cannot get such speeds. Like my internet speeds, it's 250 mbits per second. It's not even 1 gigabyte.
It's a nice feature for some people, but for me, I would never get it. But for whatever reason, on the laptop, I looked at this, I'm like, this is awesome. I totally would get this if I was buying this year's device. And I think it's because on a laptop, your face tends to be a little bit closer to the screen because we're just like that's how we use laptops. Versus a desktop, you tend to be a little bit further away from the screen. And because it's a little bit closer, I just find that the reflections that are being muted by this finish are, like, it just seems to have more impact. There's just more value to that.
It does add a little bit of like a matte screen effect, but it's not bad, right? Matte screens to me look automatically bad. This looks like a glossy screen that is reflecting very little, while having a minimum impact on like color performance.
So it's a $150 option, and it's also not like a coating or some kind of layer that they put on top. It's part of the glass. It's like a treatment for the glass. They etch it with some kind of acid, and it just does this to the glass. And supposedly it doesn't affect the durability or like fragility of it, but...
And again, this is also different. The MacBook Pro is closed. Even your Pro Display XDR with the nano texture coating, it's $1,000 there. It's really the difficult pitch, especially since also because it's a big screen, the angle at which you look at it and the distance from which you look could really make you see the imperfections. While here, they might actually have improved that process. Plus, on the smaller screen, on a portable screen, plus on a screen that gets closed up. So it will have less wear and tear through just the elements. Especially in comparison to the iPad, which will have touch input on top of that. It will have Apple Pencil input on top of that. That really seems like a no-brainer.
We'll have to see. The other new feature for the screens this year is that they now get brighter. These now are able to hit 1,000 nits at the top end, but in order to get it, you have to be in a really bright environment for that detector to be like, okay, you need that extra brightness. It's a nice feature add, but I wouldn't be buying a new device just for that brighter screen.
No, especially on M3, you already got to 600 nits. Before that, you got to 500 nits on my MacBook Pro, for example. But you can also download an app called Vivid, which I actually have here, and that one allows you to put the screen into 1000 nits mode. It will have some imperfections, like the way it handles color isn't always perfect. It basically tries to enact like an HDR effect on everything you see, and while it has been updated a lot and it works basically perfect for like basic web browsing and stuff like that, it might have some issues, especially while playing back video.
And also, there's apps like Better Display that crank up the brightness of your screen. Like beyond
true. Better Display does that. Plus, Better Display also has the resolution control. I should re-download Better Display. I would like a mode to put my MacBook into basically a 16:9 aspect ratio. Because I would like that would make my streams a lot easier. That way I have to make sure between which portions of my screen the 16:9 recording actually takes place. Desert, goodbye. Thank you so much for joining, for contributing. All support, all watching is appreciated. You guys know that.
The stock levels, if that's something that you really need. Okay, ports. So the number of USB-C ports has increased on the base model from 2 to 3. So last year's M3 MacBook Pro at the base only had these 2 USB-C ports on the left.
Does he have
and on the right?
Does he not have battery life tests for us?
All of the MacBook Pros, the M4 devices, all have
because that's one thing I usually like
on the base M4.
From Dave
it is
2D
still
videos.
just Thunderbolt 4, and then on the M4 Pro and M4 Max chips, they're Thunderbolt 5. Now, I've said this in previous videos, but Thunderbolt 5 is not particularly useful for most people in terms of like having faster storage, because Thunderbolt 3 and 4 are plenty fast for that. But Thunderbolt 5 enables higher resolution displays because of that extra bandwidth, if that's important to you. The battery life is supposed to be longer lasting this generation.
Okay. So the M4 Max does even have wait, that's the M4 Max battery. That's pretty good. I wonder if he like perfectly like matched screen brightness, because I sometimes doubt that in some of his tests. But that is really, really good. At that point, then the 16-inch version should give you well over 10 hours.
The battery size stays the same, but for my testing, I didn't see too much of a gain with heavy workflows on the 14-inch model, but for lighter tasks, it was definitely a little bit longer lasting. The webcam has improved over the previous generation. The M4 MacBook Pros are now running a 12 megapixel sensor, and this, because of the higher resolution, enables center stage. So as you move around, it'll kind of track your face and do the stuff we've seen on like iPads and iMacs. It's a neat feature, and I do think that the image quality is better, but it's very slight. Like this is still a very thin panel on the screen.
Yeah, the 1080p that is actually basically always in focus is only marginally better than the 1080p you had before.
Put like huge sensors or huge optics in that webcam area. Okay, the other thing that's changed for this year is they've gotten rid of the space gray coloration, which is, I think, a huge shame. This is the space black. It's not like a new color, but they don't have space gray anymore. It's the only dark color.
This looks great to me, but that's because of his harsh overhead
MacBook
light.
Pro they have. But otherwise, it's a nice bump. I think the performance this year is much more impressive than I thought it would be, particularly on the GPU component. But yeah, there you have it. That's the new M4.
Okay, guys, I don't think I'll watch the tech chat today. I guess the iMac we kind of accidentally almost covered with like the benchmarks from The Verge, right? They did include here some iMac stuff early on, right? iMac M4. That being said, I think those reviews make a lot of sense, and I actually do agree here for one with The Verge with their 9 out of 10 rating. Probably if the base Mac Mini had 512 gigabytes of storage, I would have to give it a 10 at that point. I just don't, I think it would be like almost an Apple Silicon moment in value, right? Because previously to get 16 gigabytes and 512 gigabytes in a Mac Mini, you would have to upgrade it to a full 1K. Now you have to go to 8K, to $800, but you also get more performance. So again, they also say it's $549. Don't know what that means. Maybe there's like small Amazon discounts already. Maybe they got something wrong. That being said, really, really good reviews. A lot of reviews. So websites like Mac Rumors stuff are aggregating all that stuff. People are really, really recommending you get it. RIP Apple stickers, sure. You can still get them at the Apple Store, but yeah, it's not the default included anymore. So it's a major upgrade. It's a major value upgrade. And again, get a little bit more storage and you will be super duper happy. And if you are somebody who seeks even more performance, feel free to seek that out because there's plenty there with M4 Pro and M4 Max. So again, everything else is pretty, like we've covered a lot of Apple news and rumors over the last couple of weeks. Especially like even now with the betas, we have so many new features across like 18.2 on iPhone, iPad, macOS Sequoia, even Vision Pro, and the ability to output like 21:9 and 32:9 ultra wide screens. Even the fact that the Apple TV got new aspect ratios. Find My is getting new share features for stolen Ike stuff. It looks like autofocus and exposure lock is actually coming to in iOS 18.2. So what Apple promised would still be coming in 2025 is actually coming. So there's so much, and I'm so grateful to be able to cover that with you. I learned with you. Sometimes I have no time to prepare those streams, so I'll just watch alongside you and react and get new info. So thank you so much. We're almost 3 hours into the stream. Before I wrap up, a small plea as always to do the YouTube jazz, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment please afterwards, not just live. With live we have plenty of comments these days, which is great, but I would like some comments also afterwards because that helps a lot with the algorithm. You can support me via super chats or stickers whenever you catch me live. Leave a small donation, it's very much appreciated. You can become a channel member and support right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Max, Maximus, and Steve for being Martech Pro Max supporters over here, or you can become a supporter over on Patreon. There are a few different tiers across the board. You don't have to pay the maximum amount. For the maximum amount, you do get a shout out in every video though, if that helps. Yeah, just follow me on Twitter, which is a hellhole and it's probably only gonna get worse. But for now, I am still there, and I will interact with you. I'll listen to your suggestions. I'll collect data, benchmark stuff, more stuff like that. So thank you so much. This is such a fun hobby to me. This is such a great way to spend time, meet new people online, for people who also believe in similar things and are interested in similar things. So I appreciate all of you so much. I'll let you know, as always, when my next stream is. Hopefully I can make one tomorrow, unless there is no real data. Maybe in 3 hours we covered enough today. So let's see. Otherwise, I'll be back next week, and next Tuesday is my birthday. So I'll definitely be doing a birthday stream, because my plans are on the weekends. So I'm free, quote unquote, on my birthday. But as always, I'll let you know on Twitter, and I'll always prepare the video like an hour or two in advance here on YouTube. Thank you so much. As always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. I'll also talk a little bit more about my PS5 Pro experience, and I'll see you then. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.